The handset was warm against my ear, and I had not pressed the key in 20 minutes. Down the mountain, in a stand of hemlock. The map said held nothing. My brother was calling me by a name only he had ever used, and Danny had been dead for 2 winters. The creek was the only thing still making noise. I stood on the switchback with my thumb over the button, and I knew, the way you know a thing in your gut before your head is caught up to it, that the worst move I could make was to answer him. It started at the trailhead hours before that, where none of it had gone wrong yet. We caught the call out a little after 8 in the evening, the last Saturday in October, and by the time I had my boots laced and my pack in the truck, the light was already gone off the valley. The page came through the county the way it always did, a flat recorded voice reading the essentials, a name, an age, a last known point. Aaron Pelletier, 26 years old, day hiker, overdue on Trail 217 up the north side of Ledger Mountain. Last seen crossing Senate Creek that morning by a couple headed down. His car still in the pullout at the trailhead, cold, locked, a parking pass in the window good through the end of the month. That was all we had, a cold car and a name. I had been doing this 14 years by then, volunteer, unpaid, the way most of us were. Weekdays I ran the parts counter at a farm supply out on the state route, and I was good at it, and it bored me in a way I never let myself look at too directly. The search work was the other thing. The thing that made the rest of it hold still. There is a kind of man who needs a reason to be up in the dark on a mountain, and I was that kind, and I had stopped pretending otherwise a long time ago. The staging area was the gravel lot where Forest Road 250 comes off the county blacktop and turns to washboard. By the time I got there, it was full of trucks, nosed in at angles with their dome lights on, and men and women pulling packs down out of beds, and the incident trailer already set up with its little generator ticking away and a work light throwing everything into hard white and hard black, cold night. 36 degrees at the trucks, and it would be colder up top. The kind of dry cold this time of year that goes for your lips first and your fingers second and does not bother with the rest of you until it has those. Linda had command. She always had command. She was a retired dispatcher, 60-some years old, and she ran a search the way a good short-order cook runs a Sunday rush, no wasted motion and no raised voice, and a memory that held every unit in her head at once. She had the map spread on the fold-down table under the work light with a grease pencil in her hand, and she looked up at me when I came in and said, "Ray, good, you're with Cole. You're ground 2, you take the main trail to the creek and work up from the crossing." Cole was 24 and he had been on the team a year and a half. Good kid. Strong, too strong sometimes, the way young ones are before the mountain has taught them what it costs. He had a wife named Steph and a baby coming in the spring, and he talked about the baby the way you talk about a thing you cannot quite believe is going to be allowed to happen to you. He was already geared up when I found him, bouncing a little on his heels against the cold, breath smoking in the work light. "You ready, old man?" he said, and grinned. Ground 1 was Reyes and Quan. Reyes I had known for years, a wiry guy who laid tile for a living and never got tired and never got scared, or never showed it. Quan was newer but solid. Linda put them up the east fork of the drainage, the steeper side, on the chance Pelletier had come off the trail chasing a shortcut down. 2 teams on the mountain and Linda at the trailer, and that was the whole of it for the first push. More would come at first light if we needed them. You always hope you will not need first light. We did the radio check standing at the edge of the gravel, where the road went dark. Linda's voice came up clean out of the handset. "Command copies ground 1, loud and clear." "Command copies ground 2, loud and clear." I keyed up and gave her my check, and she repeated it back, and that was that. Simple. I had done it 10,000 times. The little rituals of it were worn smooth in me like the handle of a tool. Danny comes into it here, and he has to, because the rest of it does not make sense without him. Danny was my younger brother by 4 years, and he had been on this same team, and 2 winters back we lost him off the same mountain, a little west of where we were standing that night. Down in the Senate Creek drainage under a foot of new snow. It was a winter call-out, a snowshoer, and it went bad the way they do. We split to cover ground. I put Danny down the drainage because he was the better route finder and the lower ground was the harder ground, and I trusted him to it. And there was a cut bank none of us had on the map, undercut by the creek, loaded with snow, and it went while he was on it. We found him at first light. I found him. I was the one who found him. He had his hand up out of the snow like he had been reaching for something, and I have never in 2 years figured out whether he was reaching or whether the snow just left him that way. I sent him down there. That is the part I carry. Linda cleared it, the sheriff cleared it, the state cleared it, everybody with a clipboard cleared it, and none of that ever once reached the place where I keep it. I sent my brother down a drainage in the dark, and the mountain took him, and I walked out, and he did not, and I kept coming back to the mountain after, which some of the guys thought was strength, and which I knew was the other thing. You go back to the place that took something from you because a part of you never really left, and you keep hoping the mountain will give you a chance to trade. Danny called me Rabbit, had done since we were kids, since a Halloween when I was 6, and our mother put me in a rabbit costume with wire ears that would not stand up, and Danny thought it was the funniest thing he had ever seen, and he never let it die. Rabbit. Nobody else on this earth ever called me that. Our mother was gone by then, and our father long before her, and there was not one living person left who knew that name. It went in the snow with Danny. That name was buried. There was no one alive to say it. So, 8:40 in the evening, give or take, and Ground 2 started up, Trail 217 with the creek, somewhere off to our left in the dark, and the beam of my headlamp making a wall of light about 30 feet out that moved when I moved. Cole walked ahead, which was how he liked it, and I let him, and we called for Pelletier every couple 100 yards the way you do, a long, steady shout with his name in it, and then we stood and listened, and there was nothing but the creek and the wind coming and going in the tops of the pines. The trail was old and well cut, a Forest Service grade with switchbacks laid in easy, second growth on both sides, and here and there the black spike of a snag left over from a burn that had run through the district back in 2017. Duff underfoot, soft and quiet, a good trail. I had been up it 100 times. Cole would call Aaron, and we would wait, and I would call Aaron, and we would wait, and the mountain would give us back the creek and the wind and nothing else, and we would go on. An hour up, at the first big switchback, Cole stopped and turned around in his light and said, "You think he's alive?" "You never know," I said. "Some of them you find sitting on a log a mile from the car, embarrassed. Some of them you don't find at all." I did not say the third kind, the kind you find but wish you had not, because Cole knew that kind was out there and there was no reason to put it into the cold air between us. "He might have just walked out a different way," Cole said, "down the east side and hitched." "Might have," I said. But we both knew the car. The car was the thing. A man does not walk out a different way and leave a cold locked car in the pull-out with his own parking pass in the window. The car meant he was still up here, one way or the other, and every hour we spent not finding him was an hour the cold had him, 36 at the trucks. It would be in the 20s, up on the shoulder of the mountain by 2 in the morning. If Pelletier was hurt and down and not moving, the cold was doing to him right now the slow arithmetic it does, and there was nothing to do about that but climb. So we climbed, and I want to be honest that the first 2 hours were good hours, in the way the work is good, the rhythm of it, the shared purpose, a young man ahead of me in the dark calling a stranger's name into the trees. The night did not stay that way. But I did not know yet, and I would give a great deal to have those 2 hours back, when a mountain at night was only a mountain at night. The first thing that was off, I did not even catch myself, and that is the truth. Cole caught it. We were maybe 2 hours up, coming to the Senate Creek crossing where Pelletier was last seen, and Linda ran a comms check on the hour the way she did, one team at a time, so the traffic stayed clean. "Command copies ground 1. Reyes came back, up on the East Fork, loud and clear. Command copies ground 2. I keyed up and gave her ground 2 in my read on the crossing, no sign yet, and she copied it and repeated it back. And then, in the second after I let off the key, there was one more. Command Copies, ground 3, the handset said, loud and clear. I looked at the radio. Then I looked at Cole, and Cole was already looking at me, his light in my eyes, so I had to put a hand up. There's no ground 3, he said. No, I said. There's not. 2 teams on the mountain. Linda had put 2 teams on the mountain, ground 1 and ground 2, and that was all she had until first light, and she had said so herself at the table under the work light. There was no ground 3. There was no reason for the words ground 3 to have come out of that radio at all, and yet I had heard them, clear as anything, in Linda's own flat dispatcher's voice. Command copies ground 3, loud and clear. I keyed up. Command, ground 2, I said. Say again your last. Did you have another team check in? There was a pause, longer than Linda usually left, and then she came back and she said, Negative, ground 2. Last traffic was your check. You have something? Thought I heard a third team, I said. Must be Skip. Copy, she said. Watch your crossing. And that was the whole of it. Skip. That is what I told myself, and it was not even a lie. Because it happens. Radio does strange things in the mountains at night. A signal off some other county's repeater, some other search, or some hunter or some trucker down on the interstate 40 miles off, bounced up the valley and laid down on our frequency for 1 second and gone. I had heard Skip 100 times. You get a word, half a word, a burst of somebody else's night, and then the mountain swallows it. That is all it was. Except Skip does not answer the roll. That is the part I walked past, standing at the crossing with the creek loud in front of me. Skip is random. Skip is a scrap. Skip does not wait for Linda to say command copies and then fill in the blank she left in the cadence she left it with a call sign that fit the sequence she was running. Ground 1, ground 2, and then, right on the beat, ground 3. It did not answer the roll like a scrap of somebody else's radio. It answered the roll like it had been listening to the roll and knew what came next. I did not think that then. I want to be straight about it. I thought Skip, and I filed it, and I turned my light on the creek crossing and got to work, because there was a man somewhere up the mountain freezing and a burst of bad radio was not going to find him. But it went in. It went in the way a splinter goes in, so small you lose it, and you only find it later when the skin around it has started to go hot. The crossing was the widest water on the trail, Senate Creek coming down off the high shoulder and a run of riffles over Pale Rock, cold coming off it, that we walked into like a room with the door open. There was a plank someone had dropped across the narrow spot years back, gone gray and greasy with wet, and I put my light on the mud at both ends of it, looking for sign. Cole worked the downstream bank, and I worked the up. I found Pelletier's boot print in the soft ground on the far side. Vibram, a size that looked right for a man his age, pointed uphill, headed on up the trail, toward the top, the way he should have been. Fresh enough. A day, maybe less. I called Cole over, and we both put our lights on it and agreed it was good sign. Headed the right way, and I keyed it in to Linda. Command, ground 2. We have a track at the crossing. Subject continuing uphill on the main trail. She copied it, and I heard her tell Reyes to hold his line on the east fork. Good print. Headed uphill. It should have made me feel better, and it did. For about a minute. The way a track always does, because a track is a person. A track is proof the person was alive enough to make it. We had him now, or we had his direction, and direction is most of the game. I put my light back on the print one more time before we crossed, the way you do, to fix it in your head. And I do not know what made me count, except that counting is what I do. It is the parts counter in me. But I ran my light back down the trail the way he had come, down toward the crossing, looking for the prints behind that one. There was the one print in the mud on the far bank. Clear. Uphill. And there was not another one behind it. Now, that is nothing. I told myself it was nothing before the thought had even finished. The ground between the plank and that patch of mud was rock and root, and hard-packed trail that would not take a print. And a man crosses a plank and steps off it onto the first soft ground, and there is your one print, and no reason on earth there should be a trail of them across bare stone. That is true. That is completely true. A single print at the edge of a crossing is exactly what you would expect and nothing else. But I stood there a second longer than the print was worth, with the cold coming off the creek and my light on that one clean track pointed up the mountain, and what went through me was not a thought in words. It was lower than words. It was the feeling of a print that had been set down, the one print, careful, the way you would press a stamp, placed, was the shape of the feeling. Like somebody had wanted us to find exactly one, headed exactly the right way, and had been thoughtful enough not to leave any others that might tell a different story. I put it with the radio. 2 nothings. I put them both away in the same drawer, and I crossed the creek behind Cole, and we went on up after the man, and the water fell away behind us, and for a good while after that, the loudest thing on the mountain was the two of us calling a name into the dark and waiting to see what came back. We had been above the crossing maybe 40 minutes when the first voice came up out of the trees. It came from below and to the left, off the trail, down toward where the creek ran, and it was thin and far, and it said, "Help." Just that. One word, drawn out a little at the end the way a man says it when he has been saying it for a while and has stopped expecting anybody to hear. Help. Cole spun so fast he nearly went off his feet. Both our lights swung down the slope and found nothing, just the gray trunks going down into the dark and the ground falling away toward the water. "That's him," Cole said. "That's him. He's down by the creek." And he was already off the trail, already 3 steps down the slope into the timber, and I got a hand on the back of his pack and hauled him up short, harder than I meant to. "Wait," I said. "Just wait." He was straining against my hand like a dog on a leash. "He's right there, Ray." "Then he'll be right there in a minute," I said. "We call it in, and we go down together, and we go down slow, because that slope's loose, and I am not carrying 2 of you out. Give me a fix on it." "Where exactly?" And that stopped him, because when he stood still and listened, when he tried to put his finger on the spot the voice had come from, he could not do it. Neither could I. It had sounded close, and it had sounded far. It had sounded like it came from the creek, and it had sounded like it came from a little above the creek. Sound does that on a slope at night, folds around the trees, comes at you off the wrong angle. I know that. I have used that fact to talk myself out of a great deal. I keyed the radio. "Command, ground 2. We have a voice below the trail. Possible subject, downslope toward the creek. Investigating." "Copy, ground 2, Linda said. "Careful on that ground." We called down the slope. I cupped my hands and I put everything I had into it. "Aaron, if that's you, call again. Keep calling. We're coming down." And we waited, and the creek ran, and the wind moved in the tops of the pines, and the one word did not come again. We waited a long time, long enough that Cole started shifting his weight. I called twice more. "Aaron, call again." Nothing came back. Not the word, not a moan, not a rock turning under a foot. The slope below us held its breath. We went down anyway, careful, sidestepping, and we worked that stretch of creek bank for the better part of half an hour, up and down, our lights raking the water and the rocks and the undercut places where a hurt man might have crawled to get out of the wind, and there was nobody. No boot print in the mud down there, no scuff on the bank, no blood, no dropped glove, no gear, no sign that any living person had been on that stretch of ground since the last rain. A man who is hurt enough to have stopped calling is a man who cannot have gone far, and there was no man, and there was no place for a man to be. I told myself he had crawled somewhere we had not looked. I told myself the voice had been real, and the man was real, and we had just missed him in the dark, and we would come back for this stretch at first light with more people, and that was the responsible thing to log. And I logged it. "Command, ground 2. Negative on the downslope, returning to trail. Recommend a hasty team back on this section at first light." Linda copied it. And Every word of it was reasonable and correct, and I did not believe the part of it that mattered, which was that the voice had ever come from a hurt man at all. Because here is the thing I did not say into the radio. When Cole first heard it, when he said, "That's him," and lunged, I had heard it too, and in that first half second before my head got hold of it, I had thought it did not sound like a stranger. It had sounded like a man I could almost place. And I had put that away too, into the same drawer, with the print and the radio, and the drawer was getting full. We climbed back up to the trail, both of us breathing hard, and we stood a minute to get our wind back, and Cole was quiet, in a way he had not been quiet all night. Then he said, "Lo, I really thought that was him." "Sounds tricky down here," I said. "Comes off the water wrong." "Yeah," he said. But he did not sound like he believed me any more than I did. We went on up. The trail steepened above the crossing, tighter switchbacks, the second growth giving way to older timber, bigger trees, more space between them, the ground opening into a park-like stretch where the burn had thinned things out years back and the new growth had not filled it in yet, easier walking. Worse for us, though I did not think of it that way then, because in the open timber you can see further, and seeing further at night means more places for your light to reach the edge of what it can do and stop. The radio came up while we were in that open stretch. Not for us. Linda, running ground 1. "Command, ground 1. How do you read?" she said. And Reyes came back, and this is where the second bad thing happened, and it happened on the radio, which is where most of it happened that night. And I have thought since that there is a reason for that a voice on a radio is a voice with everything stripped off it. No face, no body, no breath you can see, just the sound, and if a thing wanted to learn to be a man's voice, the radio is where it would practice. Because on the radio, the voice is all there is. Reyes came back and he said, "Ground 1, go ahead." And half a second behind him laid right over the tail of his own transmission, close enough that Linda would maybe not even have caught it as two things. Another voice said, "Ground 1, go ahead." The same words. The same voice. Reyes's voice, saying the same 3 words, a half beat late, like a man talking into a canyon and hearing himself come back, except there was no canyon. We were in open timber, and open timber does not echo, it eats sound, and a radio does not echo at all. I stopped walking. Cole had not caught it. He was ahead of me, calling for Pelletier. I stood with the handset up near my ear, and I waited to see if Linda had caught it. "Ground 1, say again, you doubled," Linda said. "Somebody keyed over you." A pause. Then Reyes, and only Reyes this time, sounding a little annoyed the way a tired man does. "Ground 1, I only keyed once, command. You got Quan on your end?" "Quan's with you," Linda said. It came out slow. It was not a question, and it was not an answer. And I stood there, in the dark, and understood that Linda, 40 years a dispatcher, sitting in a warm trailer at the bottom of the mountain, had just heard something on her radio that she could not make add up, and was doing exactly what I was doing, which was looking at it and looking away from it at the same time. "Affirmative," Reyes said. "Quan's right here." "Copy," Linda said. "Ground 1, ground 2. Let's keep the traffic clean tonight. The repeater's acting up." The repeater's acting up. There it was. She had found the drawer too, and she had put it in there, and she had even labeled the drawer for the rest of us, so we would all know where to file it. The repeater's acting up. And it was such a good answer, such a reasonable, boring, mechanical answer, that I felt something in my chest let go a notch. Just hearing her say it, and I hated that I felt it, because underneath the relief was the thing the relief was covering, which was that I had heard Reyes's voice say the same 3 words twice, half a beat apart, and Reyes had only said them once. We found the phone 20 minutes later, sitting on a flat rock beside the trail. Cole's light hit it first, a rectangle of glass face up on the stone, and he called me up, and we both looked at it without touching it, the way you learned to. It was Pelletier's. It had to be. A black phone in a blue rubber case, the screen dark, sitting square in the middle of the rock like a man had set it down there on purpose. Careful, the way you set a thing down when you mean to pick it back up. Not dropped, not fallen out of a pocket into the trail. Set, squared up to the edges of the rock. I pulled a glove off and touched the back of it. It was not cold. That is the part that stayed with me. It was a clear night going down into the 20s, and that phone had been sitting on a bare rock, and it was not cold. It was not warm either, not like a hand, but it was not the temperature of the rock, and it should have been. A thing left on a rock takes the rocks cold. This one had not yet, or a hand had been on it not long before. Cole crouched over it. "Should we power it up?" he said. "Might have a track log, might tell us where he went." "Bag it," I said. "We give it to the deputies at the bottom. They do it right, chain of custody." And I did not say the other reason, which was that I did not want to see what was on that phone standing on that rock in the dark, and I did not want to give it a reason to light up. He bagged it, and we marked the spot, and I called it in. "Command, ground 2. We located the subject's phone on the main trail, powered off, we're leaving it bagged and continuing." Linda copied it and asked, "Was the subject with it?" And I said, "Negative, just the phone." And she was quiet a second, and then she said, "Copy," and nothing else. And I knew she was thinking what I was thinking, which is that a man does not leave his phone. A man out here uses his phone until it dies. He does not set it down on a rock, squared to the edges, and walk off up a mountain into the cold without it. We went on. And now I was reading the ground hard, the way I do when a search has started to turn, looking for the story the ground tells, and the ground told me Pelletier's track, that same Vibram soul, going up the trail ahead of us. Good. Except a little further on, where a patch of old snow lay across the trail in the shadow of a big fir, snow that had survived up there in the cold pocket from some earlier storm, gone to crust and sugar. I put my light on it, and there were 2 sets of tracks in it. One was Pelletier's, that Vibram soul, going uphill, and beside it, in the same crust, going the same way, was another set, and I crouched over it, and I could not make it be a boot. It was long, longer than a boot, and narrow, and it did not have the blocks of a Vibram soul, or the ridges of any soul. It was smooth, and there was a depth to the front of it, and almost nothing at the heel, like something that walked up on the front of its foot. Barefoot would have been better. Barefoot I could have understood. A man in shock walks out of his boots sometimes. Hypothermia makes them do strange things. They undress. They wander. I know that. I wanted it to be barefoot. It was not barefoot. A bare foot has toes and a heel and an arch, and this had a long, smooth front and a point where the toes should splay, and no heel to speak of, and it walked beside Pelletier's boot in the snow, matched to it, stride for stride, close, the way you walk beside a man you are talking to. I did not call that one in. I want to be honest about that. I looked at those 2 sets of tracks in the old snow for a long time. Long enough that Cole came back down to see what I had, and I put my boot over the second set before he got his light on it. And I stood up and I said, "Subject's still headed up. Come on." And I walked him on up the trail. I do not know why I covered it. I have thought about it since. I think I covered it because the second I said it into the radio, it would be real, and Linda would hear it, and Reyes would hear it, and there would be no drawer left to put it in, and I was not ready. There is a kind of not ready that gets people killed, and I was in it, and I knew I was in it, and I did it anyway. We were quiet for a while after that. The trail bent up through the open timber, and the wind had died, and the cold had settled in the way it does in the small hours when the air stops moving, a still dry cold that made the inside of my nose ache. Somewhere far off, a barred owl asked its question, "Who cooks for you?" That 4-note call that sounds like a question and never gets an answer, and then it stops. And after it stopped, I noticed I had not heard it or anything else for a while. No owl, no rustle in the duff. The little sounds a living forest makes all night without you noticing. The settling and the small movement had gone out of the woods around us, and what was left was the creek, far down and behind us now, and our own boots, and our own breath. There is an order to how a forest goes quiet, and a man who spends his nights out there learns it without meaning to. The insects quit first, then the little movement in the duff, then the birds, and the quiet comes on in a ring, and the ring has an edge, and the edge moves. I had felt that edge move over us once before, 2 winters back, in the hour before we started finding the wrong things in the snow, and I had told myself then that I had imagined it. Standing in the open timber, with Cole ahead of me and Pelletier's phone bagged in my pack, I stopped telling myself that. The quiet had a center now, and the center was not where we were. The center was out ahead of us, up the trail, in the direction we were still walking, and everything living between here and there had already stopped talking, the way a room stops talking when the wrong man comes through the door. Then Cole stopped dead in the trail ahead of me and said, in a completely different voice than he had used all night, "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" I said. He did not answer right away. He was standing with his head cocked, his light off to the right of the trail, into the open timber, and his shoulders had come up. "Steph," he said. "That was Steph." "Cole," I said. "I heard her," he said, and his voice cracked on it. "She said my name. She said Cole, real quiet, off in there." And he took a step off the trail, and I got between him and the timber and put my hand flat on his chest. "Your wife is home in bed 40 miles from here," I said, low and slow, the way you talk to a man on a ledge. "She is home, and she is asleep, and she is fine. You know that. Say it back to me." He looked at me, and his eyes were wet and wide in the spill of my light, and he said, "She's home." But he said it like a man saying a thing he has been told to say, not a thing he knew, and behind his eyes I could see the other thing pulling. The thing that had heard his wife's voice say his name out of the empty timber at 3 in the morning and wanted, more than it wanted to breathe, to go to her. I did not hear Steph. That is what I held on to. I had not heard a thing. Whatever had said Cole's name in Steph's voice had said it only to Cole, pitched somehow so that only Cole caught it, and that was worse than if I had heard it too, because it meant the thing was not guessing. It had reached into Cole and found the one voice in all the world he could not walk away from, and it had used that one, and it had used it quiet, just for him. I got Cole moving again by giving him a job. That is the trick with a young one coming apart. You do not argue him out of it. You hand him a task with edges. I told him he was on the radio now, that he was to call our position to command every 10 minutes on the dot, and I did not care. If there was nothing to report, that was the job, and I put my watch in his head and made him repeat the times back. It worked, mostly. A man watching a clock is a man with one foot back in the ordinary world. He walked ahead of me, and he checked his watch, and he called our position, and Linda copied it, and for a little while it was almost a search again. We came up out of the open timber onto a bench, a flat shoulder of the mountain where the trail ran straight for a couple 100 yards before the next pitch, and the trees pulled back from both sides of it, and there was sky. Stars, hard and closed the way they get at altitude on a cold night, and the black shapes of the ridgelines against them, and off to the west, low, a piece of the moon coming up that laid a thin gray light over everything, enough to see the shape of the land by, and not enough to see what was on it. Cole was out ahead on the bench, and I was reading the tree line on the right, the way you do, sweeping my light along the edge where the open ground met the timber, because that is where a hurt man sits down, at the edge, in the last of the cover. My light went along the trees, trunk, gap, trunk, and stopped. There was a shape at the tree line that was not a trunk. It stood at the edge of the timber, back in among the trees a little, in the place where my light was already going soft with distance, maybe 80 yards off, across the open ground of the bench. It was upright. It was tall. That is the part I keep coming back to, that it was tall, taller than it should have been, its head up in the low branches of the firs, where a man's head would not reach, and it was narrow, and it was still, and it did not shine back at my light the way an elk's eyes throw green or a deer's throw white. It gave my light nothing. It stood in among the trunks, being almost a trunk, being nearly a shadow, being close enough to the trees around it that if I had swept my light past a half-second faster, I would have gone right by it. I did not stop my light on it. I want to say that clearly. Every part of me that had been on that mountain for 14 years knew not to hold my light on it, knew not to let it know I had seen it, and my light kept moving, swept on past it, along the tree line, trunk, gap, and I kept walking, and my heart did not pound. That is the thing nobody tells you. When the real one comes, the body does not do the pounding thing. The body goes quiet. My hands went steady. My mouth went dry and metal tasting, and my hearing pulled in close, and everything got simple and slow. And some cold, old animal part of me that had been asleep under the parts counter and the radio checks, and the 14 years woke all the way up and took the wheel, and it did exactly one thing. It counted the distance to coal, it counted the distance to the shape, and it did the arithmetic, which was that the shape was closer to coal than I was. Coal, I said, keeping my voice flat, keeping it a radio voice. Come back to me. Slow. Don't run. He turned around. What? He said. Come back down the trail to me, I said. We're going to move together for a while. And to his credit, the kid heard the warning in it, and he came, not fast, back down the bench toward me, and I kept my eyes on him and not on the tree line. And the whole time he walked toward me, I was aware of the shape off to the right, the way you are aware of a stove you know is hot, without looking. And I could not have told you whether it moved, because I did not look, because looking was the one thing the animal in me would not do. When Cole got to me, I put him on my left, on the downhill side, away from the trees, and I said, quiet, we are going to walk up this bench at a normal pace, and we are not going to shine our lights to the right, and we are not going to stop. He started to ask why, and I said, later, and the flat in my voice shut his mouth, and we walked. 200 yards of open ground with that thing at the edge of it, and we walked it at a search pace, boots even, lights forward, and I called out for Pelletier once, in the middle of it, because to not call would have been to admit I knew, and I was not going to give it that. Aaron, my voice came out level. I was proud of that, later, that it came out level. We made the far end of the bench, and the trail went back into the timber and pitched up, and the trees closed around us again, and I did not feel safer for it, and I did not feel less safe, because safe had stopped being one of the things that were on the table, and that was when the radio finally came all the way apart. It started ordinary, Linda running the 10-minute traffic. Command, ground 1, how do you read? And Quan answered, not Reyes, Quan, and her voice was wrong in a way I caught right off, too flat, too even, no breath in it, the words spaced out just slightly too regular, like a voice built out of other times she had said those words. Ground 1, she said, loud and clear. And Linda said, ground 1, is Reyes on with you? And there was a pause, and Quan's voice said, Reyes went down to the creek. And Linda said, say again, ground 1, why did Reyes go to the creek? And the voice that was Quan's and was not Quan's said, he heard his daughter. I stood stock still in the trail with the hand set up. Reyes has a daughter, Sophia. I have met her. And there is no reason on this earth that Quan, standing on the east fork of Ledger Mountain at 3 a.m, should have said into a radio, in that flat, even breathless voice, he heard his daughter. And there is no reason Reyes should have gone down to the creek, and Linda knew it, because Linda's next transmission did not use any call sign at all. Linda's voice came up, and it had changed. It had a thing in it I had never heard in it in 14 years, and she said, all units, hold your positions. Nobody moves. Nobody goes to any voice off the trail. Acknowledge. And ground 1's call sign answered. And ground 2's call sign answered. And I looked at Cole, and Cole had not keyed his radio, and I had not keyed mine. And then a third voice, right on the beat, filling the space Linda had left the same way it had filled it hours ago at the crossing, said, ground 3, holding. I turned my radio down. Not off. Down, so the voices out of it were small, so they could not fill my head, and I got hold of Cole by the shoulder strap of his pack, and I put my mouth close to his ear, and I said the only thing I had. "We are walking down," I said, "right now. We are not calling for anybody, and we are not answering anybody. If you hear a voice, any voice, you look at me. You hear a voice, you find my face. Nod if you have it." He nodded. His face in the spill of my headlamp had gone white and simple, all the extra washed out of it, and I thought, good, that is the fear that keeps you alive. Hold on to that one. We turned around on the trail, and we started down. We made it maybe 4 switchbacks before it used Danny. It came from below us and off the trail to the right, down in the timber, and it was not loud. That is what I keep coming back to. It did not need to be loud. It said one word, and the word was rabbit, and it was Danny's voice. Not close to Danny's voice. Not a good try at Danny's voice. It was Danny's voice, the exact pitch of it. The little rasp he had in the low end from a cigarette habit our mother never knew about. The way he leaned on the first part of the word and let the end of it go soft. Rabbit. The way he said it when we were kids, and he wanted me to come look at something, come see, come hear, rabbit. 30-odd years of my brother saying that word were in that word. And Danny was in the ground 2 winters in a plot on the other side of the county, and I had picked out the stone. I stopped on the trail. I could not help it. The animal that had been driving me stopped too, because the animal did not have a rule for this. The animal only knew predators, and this was not a predator sound. This was the sound of the person I had loved most and failed worst. And every system in me that the animal did not control lit up at once and turned toward that voice like a plant turns to a window. "Rabbit," it said again, from a little further along, a little lower, coaxing, patient, down here. And there was something under the word, a small sound, and it took me a second to place it, and when I placed it, my knees went to water, because it was the sound of Danny laughing, low, the way he laughed when he had put one over on me. The tags along, little brother, the rabbit, come see, come down here and see. My thumb was on the button. I want that in the record. I did not decide to do it. I found my hand had brought the handset up, and my thumb was on the transmit key, and my mouth was open, and the shape of a word was already in it, and the word was his name, and 1/2 of 1 second more, and I would have keyed that radio and said Danny into it, out loud, on the frequency, into the dark, and answered him. What stopped me was Cole. Cole grabbed my wrist. The kid I had spent all night keeping alive reached over and took hold of my wrist and pulled my thumb off the key, and he put his white, simple face right in front of mine the way I had told him to do for himself. And he said, "Lo, you said don't answer anybody." And the spell, if that is the word, did not break so much as crack, enough for me to get a breath through it, and I closed my mouth, and I took my thumb off the key, and down the timber Danny's voice called Rabbit one more time. Further off now, disappointed, the way he sounded when I would not follow him somewhere I knew we would get in trouble, and then it did not call again. I do not know how long we stood there. Time had come off its track. When I could move, I got Cole by the pack strap again, and we went down. Faster now, too fast for the ground. And I did not care, because I had felt how close I had come. I had felt my own mouth making the shape of the word, and I knew now the thing it wanted was not to chase us down and take us. The thing it wanted was for us to come to it, to answer, to walk down off the trail into the timber toward a voice we loved, on our own feet, calling its borrowed name into the dark. And that was so much worse than a thing that chased you, that I nearly could not hold it in my head and walk at the same time. We came down through the open timber, onto the bench again, the flat shoulder with the sky over it, and I did not want to cross it, and there was no other way down, and so we crossed it. And I kept Cole on my downhill side, and I did not look at the tree line on the right, and we were most of the way across when Cole stopped. He just stopped. I had his pack strap, and it pulled me up short. I turned around. He was looking off to the left, the downhill side, the side I had put him on, because it was away from the trees, the safe side, the open side that fell away toward the valley. And there was nothing on the downhill side but air and stars and the long dark drop of the mountain going down to the lights of the town 40 miles off. And Cole was looking at it like a man looking through a doorway into a lit room, and his face had gone soft and young and wet, and he said, in a voice I had not heard him use, a voice with all the fear gone out of it, "He's crying, the baby's crying. Can't you hear him?" "Cole," I said, "there's no baby. Look at my face." "Cole." But he was not going to look at my face. I saw it happen. I saw the thing that had been holding him to the trail let go. And I saw him take one step toward the edge, toward the drop, toward the crying only he could hear. His own son, 6 months from being born, calling him down off the mountain. And I lunged and got a fistful of his pack. And he was strong. He was so much stronger than me. And he tore loose. And the strap I had went slack in my hand with a button popping off it. And he walked off the downhill edge of the bench into the dark, as calm as a man walking into his own kitchen. And he did not scream going down. And that was the worst of it, that he did not scream, because a man does not scream on his way to a thing he loves. I did not go to the edge. I want to be able to say, I thought about it and I did not. The truth is smaller and worse. My legs were already carrying me the other way before I had a thought at all. The animal took the wheel again, and the animal did not go to the edge. The animal went down the trail, and I went with it. I ran. I am not a young man, and the ground was bad, and I ran anyway, down the switchbacks, my light bouncing, my breath tearing. And behind me and beside me and below me the voices came up out of the timber, and now there were a lot of them. Steph, calling Cole, not knowing yet, off to the right. A little girl's voice, Sophia, calling Papa down toward the creek. Kwan's flat, even voice saying my name, Ray, Ray, from up the slope, from a woman I had put on the east fork of a mountain a mile away. And under all of it, keeping pace with me, never getting closer and never falling behind, easy, like a man out for a walk, Danny. Rabbit, rabbit, slow down, you'll fall. You'll fall like I fell. Come here, and I'll show you where. I did not answer. That was the only thing I had, and I held on to it with everything left in me. I did not answer. I did not call out. I did not say a name, mine or theirs or his. I kept my mouth shut and my feet moving, and I let them talk. And the not answering was the hardest physical thing I have ever done. Harder than carrying a litter, harder than digging my brother out of the snow, because every voice out there was a hook set in a soft place in me, and all I had to do was open my mouth and they would have me, and I knew it, and I kept my mouth shut. The radio was still going in the small voice down in my chest. I could not make myself turn it off. I think I was afraid to lose Linda, the one real voice, the one warm human being at the bottom of it all. She was running the roll again. I could hear her doing it, over and over, tight and fast, a dispatcher trying to count her people by the only tool she had left. Command, all units, sound off, she said. Ground 1. And Ground 1 answered. Ground 2, she said. And Ground 2 answered, and it was not me. I had my radio turned down and my thumb nowhere near the key, and something out in the dark said Ground 2, holding in my voice. Ground 3, she said, and I could hear what it cost her to say it, to name the team that did not exist, to call the roll of a thing she was praying would not answer. Ground 3, holding, it said. Ground 4, she said. Ground 4, holding. Ground 5, holding. She kept going. She went up past the number of teams that were ever on the mountain, past 2, past the 3 that was already wrong, 4, 5, 6, and every single one answered her, right on the beat. Holding, holding, holding. A whole search and rescue operation of teams that were not there, checking in out of the timber in voices she half knew, and I understood, running down that mountain in the dark, that it had been listening to us all night, every radio check, every 10-minute call, every clean and worn and ordinary transmission, and it had them now. It had all our voices and all our call signs and all our names, and it could fill the whole frequency with us, a mountain full of searchers who were all one thing, and the one thing was down here in the dark with me, and it was patient, and it had learned to talk. Linda stopped calling the roll. There was a silence on the radio then, a real one, the first in an hour, and into it Linda's voice came, and it was small, and it was human, and it was afraid, and she said, off the protocol, off the script, just a woman on a radio in the dark. She said, "Ray, if that's you, just you, come home. Don't talk. Just come down." And I almost answered her. God help me, after everything, after Cole, after Danny, the one that nearly got me was Linda telling me to come home, because it was so kind and so tired and so exactly her. But I did not know anymore. That was what it had taken from me by then. I did not know if that was Linda or if it had learned. Linda, too, had been learning her all night, off her own radio, the way it had learned the rest of us, and there was no way to tell. There is never any way to tell. That is the whole horror of it, and so I did the only safe thing left in the world, which was to trust nothing with a voice, and I kept my mouth shut, and I ran down to my truck in the gray hour before the light, not answering the kindest thing anyone had said to me in 2 years, because it might not have been anyone at all. I came off the trail into the gravel lot at the trailhead just as the sky over the east ridge started to go from black to the color of a dead television. The lot was empty. The incident trailer was gone. Linda's rig was gone. Every truck was gone but mine, sitting alone at the edge of the gravel where I had left it, and there was no work light, no generator ticking, no radios crackling, no people, nothing but my one cold truck, and the light coming up gray behind the mountain and the creek somewhere down below. Still running, the only thing on that mountain that had never once stopped and never once lied. I did not run for the truck. I made myself walk. Running had been right on the mountain, and it was wrong here, in the open, in the gray, because running tells a thing that you know, and I did not want it to know how much I knew. So I walked across the gravel to my truck the way a man walks to his truck at the end of a long shift, tired, ordinary, and the whole time the tree line around the lot stood black and close, and the voices had come down off the mountain with me. They were at the edge of the trees now, all around the lot. Not loud. They did not need to be loud, and they had learned that too. Steph, low, off to my left, saying, "Cole, honey, where did you go?" Sophia, small, calling Papa toward the road. Kwan and Reyes, saying my name, saying, "Ray, come look, we found him, we found Aaron, come look. Linda, come home, come home, come home." And Danny, closest, right at the edge of the gravel where the light from the coming dawn stopped and the trees began, saying, "Rabbit, saying, you never did come see. In 30 years you never once came when I called you. Come on now, just this once. Come see what I want to show you." I did not look at the tree line. I got my keys out. My hands did the thing hands do when the fear is in them, the fine work coming apart, the key skating around the lock, and I made myself slow down, and I got the key in, and I got the door open, and I got in, and I pulled it shut, and I pressed the lock down with my thumb, and I sat there in my own cold truck with my own breath fogging the glass, and my heart finally doing the pounding thing now that it was too late to matter. Something was at the passenger window. I did not turn my head. I saw it the way you see a thing at the edge of your eye, a shape filling the glass on the far side of the cab, tall. So it had to stoop to bring its face down to the window, and it was still, and it did not knock, and it did not try the handle. It just brought its face down to the glass, close on the other side of an inch of nothing, and it waited for me to turn and look at it, because if I looked at it, if I gave it my eyes, if I let it see me see it, then it would have me the way it had wanted to have me all night, on my own choice, my own turning, my own answer. I put the key in the ignition, and I started the truck, and I did not turn my head, and I put it in gear looking straight out the windshield at the gray gravel, and I drove out of that lot down Forest Road 250 with a shape at my passenger window that I never once looked at, and I do not know how far it came with me, 'cause I never looked. And the not looking was the last thing I had, and I held it the way I had held the not answering, and somewhere down the washboard, past the cattle guard, past the gate that stood open when it should have been closed. The weight of it came off the glass, and the passenger window was just a window again, gray with the morning, and I was alone in the truck. And I drove down out of the mountains with my mouth shut and both hands on the wheel, and the radio dark, and I did not stop shaking until the blacktop. They found Cole at the bottom of the bench, 90 feet down in the rocks, and the report said he fell, and it was not wrong. Hypothermia, it said. Confusion in the late stage, the way the cold turns them around and walks them off of things. His wife had the baby in the spring, a boy, and I sent a card, and I did not sign it Rabbit or anything else. I just signed my name, and I have not been able to make myself go and meet the boy, and I know how that looks, and I let it look that way. Reyes walked out at first light on his own, down the East Fork, and he does not talk about it, and he left the team that winter and moved his family down to his brother's place in the valley. And the one time I saw him after at a gas station, he looked at me across the pumps, and neither one of us said a word, and that was the whole conversation, and it was enough. Quan we never found. Pelletier we never found. The car sat in the pullout until the county towed it, and there is a family somewhere that still gets up every morning not knowing, and I cannot help them, because the truth is not a thing you can put in a report, and the report is all they will ever get. Linda swears she never left the trailhead, swears the trailer was there all night, that she ran the search until dawn, that I came walking down out of the dark at 5 a.m, gray as a corpse, and would not speak to her. And I believe her. That is the part that does not let me sleep. I believe her. And I also stood in that empty gravel lot with my own eyes, and there was no trailer, and no trucks, and no Linda, and both of those things are true, and I have stopped trying to make them fit, because the thing on the mountain does not care whether they fit. The thing on the mountain lives exactly in the place where they do not. I gave up the team, told them my knees were done, which was a lie, and everybody let it be a lie. I still run the parts counter. I still get up in the dark. I park facing the road now, every time, at the store, at home, at my sister-in-law's, always nosed out toward the road so I never have to back up toward the trees. And I could not tell you the first thing about why, except that I could tell you exactly. I kept the radio, a handheld from that night. I do not know why I kept it either. I told myself I would turn it in, and I never turned it in, and it sat in a drawer in my kitchen for a long time, dead, the battery long gone, and I would open the drawer for a spoon and see it and close the drawer. 2 nights ago I put a fresh battery in it. I do not know why I did that. It was late, and I could not sleep, and the house was too quiet, and I found myself at the kitchen table with the radio in front of me and a new battery going into the back of it, and I turned it on, low, the way I used to carry it, and there was nothing, just the soft hiss of an open channel, and I sat there with a cup of coffee going cold, and I listened to the nothing, and I think some part of me was waiting to hear Danny, waiting to be given one more chance to answer him, which is a thing I should not admit, and which is the truest thing here. And a little after 3 a.m, out of the hiss, in a dispatcher's flat and even voice that was not Linda's and was nobody's, the radio said, "Command, ground 2, how do you read?" My call sign from that night, "Command calling ground 2. And I sat very still at my kitchen table, 40 miles from the mountain, with my hand not anywhere near it, and I watched my own radio, and out of it, right on the beat, in my own voice, worn, smooth, and tired, and exactly the way I say it, exactly the way I have said it 10,000 times, the handset answered. "Ground 2, it said. Go ahead." The heater in the truck had just started to smell like something burning off it, the way it does the first hard, cold night of the year when the tone dropped on the pager, clipped to the visor. I was parked in the lot behind the fire hall with the engine running, and my brother in the passenger seat eating a gas station burrito, and we both stopped what we were doing to listen to the address. County called out a drainage instead of a street. Wade set the burrito down on the dash and did not finish it, and that was how I knew it was going to be a long night before dispatch said one word about the weather. They gave us Coldwater Basin. Overdue snowshoer, male, mid-30s, last seen on the trail 3 days back, reported by his wife when he did not come home Sunday and did not answer the satellite messenger she had made him carry. His truck was still at the trailhead at the end of Forest Road 19, snowed into the mirrors. A plow driver had spotted it on his morning run and called it in, and by the time County pieced it together with the missing person report, it was Tuesday night and the man had been up there through 2 storms and 1 clear cold snap that had put the valley at 20 below and the high country a good deal under that. I have been doing this for going on 11 years. Volunteer, ground pounder, no rank to speak of. I fix furnaces during the daylight and I carry a pack up hills in the dark for free. And if you ask my ex-wife, she will tell you which of the 2 ruined the marriage, and she will be partly right. Wade came onto the team 4 years ago, after he got out of the service and moved back and needed something to do with his hands and his nerves. He is 9 years younger than me. Our mother asked me to keep an eye on him, and I said I would, and I have, and I want that on the record before I tell the rest of this, because the keeping of that promise is the hook the whole night hung itself on. We staged at the trailhead a little after 11:40 p.m., 6 of us on the ground team, plus the dog. Boone had the lead, and Boone is the reason any of us are any good. A retired smoke jumper with a white mustache stained yellow in the middle and hands like a couple of catcher's mitts left out in the rain. Petra was our medic, a small, hard woman who ran ultramarathons in the summer and worked at the county morgue in the winter and did not seem to see much difference between the 2. Gil ran the dog, a Belgian named Juno, who was worth more than any 2 men on the team and knew it. Hollis was the 6th, older than Boone even, quiet, a man who had trapped that country when there was still a bounty on cats, and who could read a slope the way I read the back of my own hand. Boone counted us at the trucks before we went in. He always did. He would walk the line with one mitt out and touch each of us on the shoulder or the pack, not pointing, touching, the way you count cattle through a chute so you do not lose your place, and he would say the number under his breath at the end of it. That night the number was 6. He touched me last on the strap and said 6, and then he said the thing he always said, which I had heard so many times it had gone smooth as a river stone and stopped meaning anything. Count them out, he said, not in. You count a team out. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make it sound like an omen, and it was not one, not then. It was housekeeping. Any lead worth a damn counts as people off the hill, because the hill is where you lose them, and the number that matters is the one you come home with. Boone had a longer version he told new members on their first call-out, and Wade had gotten it 4 years back sitting on that same tailgate, and it went about like this. You count them out, not in, because going in a man is glad to be seen, and coming out he might not be. And if you ever count your team and the number comes up wrong, you do not say so on the hill. You get everybody down to the trucks first, into the light, into the cab with the doors shut, and then you sort out your arithmetic. You do not stand out there in the dark announcing that your count is off. Nothing good has ever come of a man doing his counting out loud in the dark. New people always laughed at that part. Hollis never did, I noticed, but Hollis did not laugh at much. The plan was simple, the way these things are always simple, until they are not. We would take the Coldwater Trail up the drainage to the basin, 4.5 miles and about 2,000 feet of climb, a route Boone and Hollis had both walked 100 times in better months. The snowshoer's most likely track, given his truck and the trail register and where his wife said he liked to go, put him up in the basin under the saddle, a big open bowl below the ridgeline of Mount Corliss where the winter views are the kind of thing that make a man drive 3 hours and walk half a day to stand in. Avalanche country, all of it, but the cold snap had locked the snowpack up hard for the moment, and the new storm was only just starting to move in. We had a window. The forecast said the front would arrive sometime before dawn and bring wind and a foot of new snow and close the window with the whole basin on the wrong side of it. Get up, find him, get him down, beat the weather. That was the whole of it. Command stayed at the trailhead in a camp trailer with a generator and a heater and a map board. Our incident number was 7218, and we were Ground Team 2, and I was carrying the radio, which made me Ground Team 2 on the air, whether I liked it or not. There was supposed to be a second team, a Ground Team 1, coming up the far side from the county road, but they were an hour behind us getting staged, and I will tell you now, they never made the basin, and it does not matter to this story, except that we were alone up there, and we knew it. We started up at midnight. 0000, Boone said into the cold, which was his little joke, top of the clock, and nobody laughed, because it was already 30 below at the trucks and dropping, and there is a kind of cold that takes the humor out of a man early and saves it against later. Our headlamps went on down the line, 6 white cones, and the snow came up under them blue where it was deep and packed, and gray where the wind had scoured it. And off the trail on either side, the beams reached maybe 30 feet into the timber and quit. And past that, there was the mountain and no way to see it. Wade broke trail the first hour. He was the strongest of us on the up, and he knew it. And he liked to spend it early. And I let him, because it kept him in front of me where I could see the back of his pack and the swing of his snowshoes. And because a man who is working that hard does not have the breath to talk himself into anything, I fell into the rhythm behind him. That is the thing nobody tells you about this work, that most of it is a rhythm, the crunch and squeak of the shoes, the huff of your own breath in the balaclava, the click of a pole, the little grunt a man makes on a steep step. Hours of it. The mind goes somewhere while the body walks. Mine went where it always goes on a night search, which is back to the one before all of these, the one I do not talk about, the one that is the reason I count so carefully and camp away from slopes and read the snow like it is trying to lie to me, because once it did, I will give it to you short, because it has to be in here, and I do not want to sit in it. 15 winters back, before the team, before any of this, my brother Nathan and I went up a Peak 2 ranges east of Corliss on a clear February morning, and I dug a pit and looked at the layers and told him the slope was fine, and it was not fine, and it took him 180 feet down, and I dug for 40 minutes with my hands and the shovel and my probe before the second party got there. And when we got him out, he had been under too long. He was 20. I was the older brother, and I called that slope safe with my own mouth, and I have made every call since then like a man trying to buy back one he cannot buy back. Wade was 11 when it happened. He does not remember Nathan well. To me, the two of them have never been more than a room apart. And on the up that night, watching Wade's pack swing in my headlamp, I had them in the same thought the way I always did. The living one in front of me and the dead one just past the edge of the beam where the light quit. We took our first real break at the 2-mile marker, a bench where the trail flattened out under a stand of old spruce heavy with snow, the branches bent down into hoods and caves. Boone called it, and we dropped packs and got water and food into us fast before the cold could find the sweat. Petra checked us, each without making it a thing, a look, a question, a hand on a cheek to feel for the waxy start of frost nip. Juno lay down in the snow and faced the timber uphill and did not sleep. Gil said she was tired. She did not look tired to me. She looked like a dog with a job she had not been given yet. Boone had me raise command for a comms check. I keyed up and gave our location and our number and got a bored voice back from the trailer. 10-4 ground team 2, copy 6 souls at the 2-mile. And I looked down the bench at the 5 shapes hunched over their water and the dog past them, and I counted without meaning to, the way you do once someone says a number on the radio. 5 and the dog and me. 6. It matched. Of course it matched. I put the radio away and ate my frozen candy bar in 2 bites and got my pack back on. And if you had told me right then that number 6 was going to come apart in my hands before the night was out, I would have laughed at you, and it would have been the last easy laugh I had for a long time. We went up into the dark, past the spruce, and the trail tipped over into the drainage proper, and the wind found us for the first time, coming down off the high country in a long, cold exhale that carried the front's first snow in it, fine as flour. And Wade turned around in his tracks and grinned at me, with the frost already white in his eyebrows, and said, "Here it comes." And I said, "Here it comes," and we put our heads down and climbed. The drainage narrowed and steepened above the bench, and the trail gave up pretending to be a trail. Under 3 feet of snow, it was just a line Hollis carried in his head. A seam between the timber on the left and the open avalanche path on the right, where nothing grew taller than a man's waist because every few winters the whole slope came down and mowed it flat. Boone put Hollis up front through that stretch, and Wade dropped back to third, and I was glad of it, because the open path was the kind of ground the old me would have turned us around at. And it took Hollis reading the surface out loud, in his flat voice, "Wind slab here, watch the pillow, cross one at a time, to keep me walking it." We spread out the way you do in slide country, one man on the exposed ground at a time, and the rest waiting on the safe side of the trees, so that if it went, it would only take one of us. I hated it. I have hated it since I was 20. But Hollis knew the ground, and Boone knew Hollis, and I knew Boone. And that chain of knowing is the only rope you have on a night like that, so I crossed when I was told and waited when I was told. It was on the far side of the open path, waiting my turn in the trees with Petra while Wade crossed, that I looked back down the drainage and counted the team and got 7. I want to walk you through it exactly, because the exactness is the whole thing, and because in the moment it was nothing, it was arithmetic done wrong by a cold, tired man, and I fixed it and moved on the way you fix a math error on a receipt. I was in the timber with Petra beside me. Ahead of us, out on the open slope, Wade was a single lamp moving steady across the white. Past him, already in the trees on the uphill side, were 2 more lamps close together, which would be Boone and Hollis waiting for the rest of us to come across. Behind me and downslope, Gil was coming up with Juno, 1 lamp low to the ground for the dog and 1 at Gil's head, so that was 2 lamps for the 2 of them. Me and Petra made 2 more. Add them the way I did, standing there stamping my feet, and you get Wade at 1, Boone and Hollis at 2, me and Petra at 2, Gil and the dog at 2. That is 7 lamps for 6 people and a dog, which is right because the dog carries a light too. Except I had counted the dog's lamp low and separate, down near the snow where it belonged, and then I had counted 7 lamps at head height, 7 up high. One of them down low for Juno made 8 points of light on that mountainside, and there were 7 of us to carry them if you counted the dog as one of us, which Gil always did. I counted again. I made myself go slow. Wade, out on the slope, 1. The pair in the trees, uphill, Boone and Hollis, 2, so 3. Gil below me, 1 at his head, and Juno's low, so 5, and the dog's light makes it look like more. Me and Petra, 7. And that was fine. That was 6 people and the dog, and I had spooked myself doing bad math against the wind, and I let out a breath, and it froze on my collar. But there had been a lamp in the trees uphill, past Boone and Hollis, higher up, off to the side of where the trail went. I had seen it when I counted the first time and not the second, the way you see a star better when you are not looking straight at it. A single steady light, well above the 2 waiting lamps, back in the timber where nobody had any reason to be, because Hollis had us all strung out below the open path and nobody had crossed to the top yet but the ground team ahead of us, and they were the 2 lamps I could account for. Ground team won, I thought, and the thought was such a relief that I grabbed it with both hands. They had come up faster than dispatch said. They had crossed over from the county side and dropped into the top of our drainage, and that was one of their lamps up in the trees, scouting the line down to meet us. That made sense. That made all the sense in the world. I even keyed the radio to ask Command whether one had made the ridge, and then I did not, because Command would have told me if another team was on our mountain, that is the entire point of Command, and if I called and they said no team is above you, the night would change its shape in a way I was not ready for it to change. So I did not call. I told myself I did not call because the radio traffic would clutter the net during a technical crossing, which was a real reason, a good reason, a reason Boone would have nodded at. That is how it works. You always have the good reason ready. Petra tapped my arm. Your turn, she said. Wade was across and into the uphill trees, and it was me next on the open ground, one man at a time. And I stepped out of the timber onto the slope and forgot the light because the slope does not let you think about anything but the slope. I crossed it the way Hollis said, quiet, even, no hard steps, watching the surface go from scoured hardpack to the soft pillowed drift at the center where the wind loaded it, feeling the whole mountain balanced under my snowshoes the way you feel a frozen lake flex. And I did not breathe right until I was in the trees on the far side with Boone's mitt on my shoulder counting me in. Or rather not in, because Boone did not count on the hill, he just touched each of us as we came across so he would know we had. When Petra was across, the last of us, Boone gathered us in the trees for a second to let the dog rest and to get his bearings for the pitch above. And I looked at the six of us close together in the spill of our lamps, breath and steam and frost, Wade wiping his goggles, Gil down on one knee with Juno, Hollis looking up the drainage the way he always looked up things, Petra already moving among us with her eyes, Boone with his map in a plastic sleeve. 6. I counted them 3 times without moving my lips. 6 every time. Whatever I had seen up in the trees was gone now, or had never been a 7th lamp at all, just Boone's beam catching a fold of snow, or my own light thrown back at me off a slab, or Ground Team 1 somewhere up on the ridge, minding their own business. Juno was looking up the slope, past all of us, into the timber where the light had been. She was not growling. Gil had his arm around her, and she was leaning her whole weight into him and looking up the hill, and her ears were forward. And Gil said, "Easy, girl. She smells the subject. She is working." And I wanted so badly for that to be it that I said, "Good, that is what we came for," and we went up. The pitch above the open path was the hardest walking of the night, and the last of the easy part of the night, though we did not know to be grateful for it. We climbed a head wall of frozen switchbacks with the wind full in our faces now, the front arriving in earnest. The fine snow turned to a driving grit that ticked on our hoods and packed into every seam. The temperature had bottomed out somewhere I did not want to know, and the wind was pulling the heat off us faster than we could make it. Talk stopped. There was only the work and the little world each of our headlamps made, 30 feet of glowing white that moved when we moved, and past it the mountain, bigger in the dark than it ever is in daylight. We topped out into the basin a little after 0300. I knew the place from photographs Boone had shown us, a great open bowl a half-mile across under the black wall of Corliss. The saddle a low notch on the ridgeline to the west, where the summer trail crossed over to the county side. In the storm I could see none of it. The head wall led us out onto a flat, and the flat ran off into blowing snow in every direction, and there was no wall and no saddle and no sky, just the ground at our feet and the grit going sideways through our beams. Boone brought us in tight and got the map out and put Hollis's memory next to it, and they decided the subject's most likely spot was the lee of a big glacial boulder. Hollis knew, off to the northwest under the saddle, where a cold man would go to get out of exactly the wind that was trying to kill us. We roped a loose search line, not a real rope, just spacing ourselves at the edge of each other's light so nobody drifted off alone, and we started across the basin toward the boulder Hollis carried in his head. Juno found the track before we found the boulder. She hit it maybe 200 yards out onto the flat, put her nose down and her whole body changed, and Gil called it in his working voice, "She's got something," and we closed on him. And there it was, in the beam of 6 lamps. A line of snowshoe tracks coming in from the south and turning to run northwest toward where Hollis said the boulder was. Old track, drifted half full, but snowshoe, the diamond weave of a rental frame, pressed into a crust that had since gone over hard. So this was from before the cold snap locked things up. This was days old. And it was going the right way. And for about 4 seconds, every one of us forgot the cold because we had a track, and the track had a direction, and at the end of a direction, there is a man. Then Hollis crouched down over it with his lamp and went still, and Hollis going still was a thing you learned to watch for, and he said, "Without any weight on it, there's 2. We looked. He put the beam along the track low and sideways, the way you do to throw the shadows long, and once he did it you could not unsee it. The snowshoe prints ran up the middle, drifted and old, and laid down inside them, stepping in them, one to each, was a second set, bare of any snowshoe. Just the shape of a foot, a boot maybe, hard to say, pressed down into the bottom of each snowshoe print like a man had come along after and walked the track heel to toe, placing each step exactly inside the one before. Newer than the snowshoe track, a lot newer. The crust had blown over the snowshoe prints, and the second set punched clean through that blown crust to the bottom, which meant the second set had come through after the wind loaded them, which meant hours ago at the most, maybe less. Somebody's been up here, Gil said. Somebody found him before us and walked his back trail. Ground Team 1, I said. And there it was again, that word, that relief. And I saw Petra's head come up, because she had heard me say it once already down at the open path, and she was starting to keep track of how many times I reached for it. Command never said one made the basin, Boone said. He said it flat, not arguing, just laying the fact down next to the other facts. And a man walking a back trail walks it easy. He does not step in every print. Nobody had anything for that. You do not in fact step in every print. It is more work, not less. You would have to want to, and you would have to be able to. And the subject's stride and the second walker's stride would have to match exactly for it to come out that clean. One boot to one snowshoe, all the way up the line as far as our lamps could throw. I crouched next to Hollis and put my own lamp on the nearest of the second set prints. The clean, deep one punched through the crust, and that was when I saw the water in it. The bottom of the print was wet. Not iced. Wet. Standing. A little black pool that may be the size of a silver dollar sitting in the toe of the print, and as I looked the pool got bigger, welling up slow from the packed snow at the bottom the way water comes up in a boot track on a spring trail. It was 30 below zero and change and falling, and the wind was stripping the moisture out of the air itself, freezing the spit in my mustache, and the print was filling with dark water, like the ground under it was warm and wet and running just below the crust. I put my mitt down next to it, not in it, next to it, and the snow there was hard as a countertop and dry as flour and squeaked under my glove, and 6 inches away in the print the black water welled and stood and did not freeze. I looked at Hollis. Hollis was looking at it too. He's the oldest man I know, and he has seen this country do things most people would not believe, and his face had gone to something I had not seen on it before. A careful blankness. The face of a man deciding not to say a thing out loud. He stood up. He put his snowshoe over the print, not stepping on it, just breaking the sight line, and he said, "We are burning our window. The boulder is that way." And he walked. And after a second we followed him. And I did not look back at the track because I did not want to see how many sets were in it now. The boulder was where Hollis said it would be, a house-sized block of gray granite standing alone on the flat, with a long tail of drifted snow behind it, and in the lee of it, out of the wind at last, we found the man we had come for. He was sitting up against the rock with his knees drawn to his chest and his arms around them and his chin down, the way a cold man sits when he has decided to wait out weather that is not going to let up, and he had been sitting like that long enough that the drift had come up over his boots and his pack, and the wind had polished the exposed side of him to a shell of rime. His snowshoes were off, and stood upright in the snow beside him where he had planted them. Petra went to him and did the thing she had to do, and did not have to say anything when she was done, because we could all see that whatever we had climbed the mountain for, we had not gotten here in time to do it. He had died out of the wind, at least. That is a thing you tell the family. He got out of the wind and he was not in pain and he went to sleep. Some of that is even true. Boone stood over him a long minute with his lamp down. 3 days, he said, maybe 4, before the cold snap even. He has been sitting here through both storms, which meant, and I did the arithmetic slow because I did not want to get to the end of it, that the man in front of us had not walked anywhere in days. He had not made a fresh track through blown crust hours ago. He had not walked his own back trail heel to toe, placing his boots in his own snowshoe prints. He had been sitting frozen against this rock since before the wind that loaded the crust the second set punched through. The snowshoe track we had followed in was his, going back days, drifting fuller every hour. The second set of prints inside it belonged to somebody or something that had come along after, in the last few hours, and had walked the dead man's trail all the way up to the dead man's back, stepping in every print, and had then, I understood, walked away, because there was no one here but him and us. Gil put his lamp on the snow around the base of the rock while Petra worked, and I wish he had not, because the second set was there too, all around the dead man. The clean deep prints came in out of the flat and walked a slow ring around him where he sat once, twice, close in, the way a man walks around a thing he is deciding about, and then they stopped, right in front of him, toe to toe. A pair of prints planted in the snow, a foot from the dead man's bowed head, facing him, standing, as if whatever made them had crouched down in the storm hours ago and put its covered face close to his and stayed there a while, learning him. And then the prints turned and went back out onto the flat toward where we had come up from, toward us, and every one of the ones I could see in the lamp had a little black pool standing in the bottom of it, and the cold had done nothing to any of them. I did not say any of that. Nobody did. Petra called it up to command, one deceased, subject located, recovery, not extraction, and command copied it back in the same bored voice and told us the front had come in worse than forecast, and the second team had turned around at tree line, and we were to package the subject if we safely could and get ourselves down off the ridge, that the wind at the trailhead was gusting to 50 and the basin would be worse. 10-4, I said. We are packaging and coming down. Copy ground team 2. Command said, 6 souls and the subject. Confirm. 6 souls and the subject, I said, and I looked at us in the lee of the rock, Boone and Hollis and Petra and Gil and Juno and Wade and me, and it was 6, I counted it, 6, and the dog and the dead man, and I keyed off and put the radio away. We had the litter and the windscreens, and we worked fast because working fast was the only warm we had left, and because the mountain was telling us in every gust that our welcome was up. We got the subject freed from the drift and onto the litter and wrapped and lashed, and it is ugly work, and I will not walk you through it, except to say that 6 people around a litter in a 50-mile wind is not 6 people. It is one animal with 12 hands, and for a little while doing it, I forgot everything but the next lash and the next, and that was a mercy. It was Gil's dog that brought it back. Juno would not come to the litter. She had worked the whole climb, done her job, found the track and found the man, and now with the man found and the wind-up, she should have been tucked in tight against Gil, begging to go down, and instead she had backed off to the end of the flat at the edge of our light and set herself between us and the open basin, and she was standing stiff-legged, facing out into the blowing snow, with her hackles up in a ridge from her neck to her tail, and she was making a sound I had not heard a dog make, not a bark and not a growl, a low steady sound way down in her that did not stop for breath. Gil went to her and got a hand in her ruff, and she did not look at him. She was looking out into the storm, west, toward the saddle, and her whole body was pointed like a finger. There's nothing out there, Gil, Boone said. Whatever she's got, it's the cold making her strange. Get her on the leash and let's move. And that was when my radio talked. It did not crackle first the way it does when command keys up, that little breath of open squelch before a voice. It just talked, mid-word, like I had walked in on the back half of a sentence, and the voice was a man's voice, and it was using our patter, the exact cadence of it, unhurried, professional. And it said, from the saddle, we have your lamps, come to us, we are all here, come up to the saddle. And then the squelch closed and it was gone. I stood there with the wind trying to take me off my feet, and the radio in my mitt. Boone was looking at me. Everybody was looking at me except Gil, who was fighting the dog, and Juno had stopped her low sound and was now barking full out into the west with her front feet coming off the ground. "Command," I said into the radio. "Ground Team 2, say again, you're last. You're broken." And Command came back, and Command's voice was different from the voice, thinner, farther, real, and Command said, "Ground Team 2, we did not transmit. We have had no traffic on this net in 4 minutes. Say your status." And I looked west into the blowing dark toward the saddle, where the voice had said, "Come up to us. We are all here," and there was a light there. One light. Steady. Up in the notch of the saddle where the summer trail crossed over, a single white lamp burning through the storm, not moving, not searching, just standing. Pointed down the basin at the 7 of us in the lee of the rock. And I say 7 now, and I said 6 then, and that is the last time in this account the two numbers are going to agree. Boone made a decision the way he always did, fast and out loud and final, and it was the right one, it was the only one, and it did not save us from anything. "We do not answer that," he said. "We do not go to that light. We package up, and we go down the way we came right now, litter in the middle, and nobody talks to anything on that ridge. Gil, leash the dog, or carry her. Everybody on the litter, move." We moved. And here is where the counting starts to matter, so I am going to slow down again the way I did at the open path, because it was in the moving that Boone did his count. A loaded litter takes 6, 2 on each side, and 1 at the head and 1 at the foot, and with 6 people, that is exactly the team, no one spare, which is why Boone had to touch each of us to place us, and he went around the litter in the wind, putting a hand on each of us and calling the position. Head, foot, left front, left rear, right front. And he got to the 6th of us and put his hand out for right rear. And there was a person there. And behind that person, at the tail of the litter where nobody was posted, there was another. I saw his hand stop. I saw it in the light because I was left front. And I was looking right at him across the wrapped shape of the dead man. Boone's mitt went out and touched a shoulder, and his mouth started to make the word, and then his eyes went past that shoulder to the one behind it, and his face did the thing Hollis's face had done at the track. The careful blankness, the shutter coming down, a man deciding in the space of a breath not to say the number he had just counted. Because there were 6 of us posted around the litter, 1 to each station, and there was a 7th person standing at the foot of the litter in the blowing snow, with a hand already on the rail, helping, ready, and the 7th person was dressed like us. He had a shell on, a red and gray shell, our county colors, the same jacket 6 of us were wearing, with the reflective bands on the arms that threw our lamps back white, and he had a pack and a headlamp, and his hood was up and his balaclava was up and his goggles were down so that there was not 1 inch of him showing, not skin, not eyes, nothing but our own gear worn by a shape the right size to be a man. And Boone looked at him for 1 second, and then Boone said, in a voice with nothing in it, "Position's good. Lift on 3," and he did not say 7, and he did not say, "Who are you?" and he did not let on, because he was the lead, and the lead does not do his counting out loud in the dark. He gets his people down to the trucks first, and this was Boone keeping the oldest rule he had. And I understood in that second that the rule had never been housekeeping at all, that Boone had learned it somewhere from someone, the way Hollis had, and that neither of them had ever told the new people the real reason, because the real reason is not a thing you can say on a tailgate without it sounding like a joke. We lifted on 3. 7 of us lifted a litter that takes 6, so it came up light, too light, and I felt the wrongness of that in my arms, the load sharing out 1 hand too many, and I set my jaw and I did not look at the foot of the litter, and I carried. I have to tell you about the name now, because it is the part I have not been able to put down in the years since, the part that is under everything. The reason I sold my snowshoes and stopped answering call-outs and moved my mother in with me so I would never again have to promise anyone I would watch their son. We had gone maybe 100 yards back toward the head wall, fighting the wind, the litter swaying, when the seventh one spoke for the first time. It spoke across the litter, conversational, into the storm, the way a man on a carry says something to keep his mind off his shoulders, and it said, "Easy on the downstep," and it said it in Wade's voice. Not close to Wade's voice. Wade's voice, my brother's voice, the living one, the one 9 years younger than me, the one I had promised to watch, coming out of the covered shape at the foot of the litter, easy on the downstep. And my own Wade, my real Wade, was on the right front rail 3 feet from me with his goggles up, and I saw him hear it. I saw him hear his own voice come out of somebody else. He looked at me across the dead man. His eyes over the balaclava were as wide as I have ever seen a grown man's eyes. And he did not say anything, because Boone had said nobody talks to anything on that ridge. And Wade was a good soldier and a good brother, and he kept his mouth shut and carried, but his eyes found mine and held them. And the two of us carried that litter down the flat toward the head wall with the thing behind us wearing our jacket and using his voice, and I did the only thing I could do, which was to look at my brother's face and keep looking at it, memorizing it, the real one, the one with the scar through the eyebrow from a dirt bike when he was 14, the crooked front tooth, the way his left eye squints more than his right, so that whatever happened on the way down I would not lose track of which one of them was mine. The seventh one talked the whole way to the head wall. It was learning. That is the thing I understood as it went, and it is the thing I have not been able to stop understanding since. When it first spoke, it only had Wade, one line, "Easy on the downstep," said the way Wade would say it. But as we walked, it tried the others. It said something in Gil's flat delivery about the dog. It said a thing in Petra's clipped way about watching the litter tip. It even reached for Boone. Low, under the wind, a fragment of Boone's own patter, count them, and got the cadence not quite right, a half-beat slow. A man saying a phrase he had heard once, and not worn smooth. And I remembered the register. I remembered the word for it. That the horror of the thing is not that it is monstrous. It is that it is approximate. It had gotten us nearly right, and the nearness was worse than any wrongness could have been. And under all of it, every few steps it came back to Wade, because it had watched me watch Wade, it had counted my counting, it knew whose voice would open me up, and it said, "Easy, easy, easy," on the downstep, in my brother's voice, until the word easy stopped being a word. At the top of the head wall, Boone called a stop to reset for the down, and it was the right call, and it cost us, because a stop meant we set the litter and stood, and standing meant we were a cluster of shapes in the blowing snow instead of one moving animal, and it is easier to count a cluster. I did not want to count. I counted anyway. You cannot make yourself not do it once a night has taught you to. I counted the shapes at the top of that head wall in the spill of our lamps, and I got 7, and the dog every time, and one of the 7 stood a little apart, at the edge, always at the edge of the light, wearing my brother's jacket and my brother's face, behind goggles that gave nothing back but my own beam. Hollis got close to me while Boone worked the map, close enough to speak under the wind, and he did not look at me while he did it. He looked down the head wall at the drop in the dark. "Down low," he said, "on the open path. It will want us strung out and one at a time on the open path, because that is where a team stops watching each other and starts watching the snow. You keep your eyes on your brother, not on it. On him. And when we are all across, we do not stop and count. We keep walking. You hear me. We do not stop on the far side and take a count where it can hear us. We walk all the way to the trucks, and we count in the cab with the door shut. I said I heard him. I asked him the only thing I wanted to ask, which was the wrong thing, which was, "What is it?" And Hollis looked at me then, the old trapper who had run those mountains 60 years, and he said, "I do not know what it is. I know what it does. It comes down with a party that is short one. It has been coming down off this ridge a long time. My daddy counted a team off this mountain in 1941 and came home with a number he did not say out loud, and he told me the rule the same way Boone tells it, and now I am telling you, and the telling is the whole of what any of us know." And then Hollis said, "The thing that I have kept, The thing that is truer than anything a folklorist could have handed me, he said. Do not let it hear you learn its name, because it does not have one yet, and it is up here looking for one, and it will take the first name it hears you love. And I thought of the light at the saddle saying, come to us, we are all here, and I thought of my brother's voice saying, easy, and I understood that it had already heard the name it wanted, because it had heard me not counting weight all night the way a man does not touch a bruise. And it was carrying our litter down the mountain, waiting for me to call my brother's name out loud into the dark so it would know which one to answer to. We started down the open path one at a time. Boone would not carry the subject across the slide path. He made that call at the top of it, and it was the hardest and best thing he did all night. The wind had loaded the open slope through the whole recovery, hours of it, snow blowing off the flat and packing into a fat pillow across the same ground we had crossed on the way up. And Hollis put his lamp on it and said one word, and the word was loaded. And Boone said, we cache the subject here, and we mark him, and we come back with more people and better weather. And no man carries 180 pounds of dead weight across that. Nobody argued. We pulled the litter back into the trees at the top of the path and lashed it to a spruce, and Petra logged the position, and Gil marked it, and we left the man we had climbed a mountain for tied to a tree in the storm. Because the living come first, that is the rule under all the other rules, and I hated it, and it was right. Then we crossed, one at a time. The way we had come up, the way you always do it, one body on the loaded slope and the rest waiting in the timber on the safe side, so the mountain can only have one of you. Hollis went first to set the track. He crossed slow and even and made the far trees and turned his lamp back to light the crossing for the rest of us, one small star on the black far side of the slope. Boone sent Petra next. She crossed. 2 lamps on the far side now. He sent Gil with the dog, and Juno did not want to go out onto the open snow. She planted and fought the leash the whole way, and Gil half-dragged her, and I hated watching it, because a dog that will not cross a slope knows something about the slope. But they made it. 3 lamps, and the dog on the far side. That left 4 of us in the timber at the top, waiting. Me, Boone, Wade, and the one in our jacket, standing at the edge of the light. Boone put his hand on Wade's shoulder, and I saw him decide the order, and I knew, before he said it, what he was going to do and why. He was going to send Wade across, and then the thing, and cross last himself, so that the last 2 men off the loaded slope would be the lead and the extra, and no living member of the team would be left alone in the timber with it. He was thinking about all of us at once, the way he always did, doing his arithmetic in his head where it could not be heard. Wade, he said, you are next. Go on the same track. Do not stop in the middle. We are right behind you. Wade went. I watched my brother step out onto the loaded slope and start across the pillow of wind-packed snow with his lamp making its little world around him. And I stood in the trees with my heart going and my mouth gone to metal, and I watched the back of his pack the way I had watched it all night. The real one, the scar, the crooked tooth. The squint I could not see under the goggles but knew was there, and he was a third of the way across, and then he was halfway, and then the slope made the sound. It is not a loud sound. That is the thing people get wrong. It is not a roar, not at the start. It is a low, soft whump that you feel in your feet more than hear, the sound of a whole acre of snow settling onto itself all at once, the sound of the layer under the pillow giving up. And I had heard it once before in my life, 15 winters back, and I have heard it every night since, in the half-second before I wake, and I heard it now with my brother standing in the middle of it. The slope whumped, and a crack ran across it in the light of 4 lamps, a clean dark line opening in the snow above Wade and running out to both sides faster than a man can flinch, and the whole loaded pillow shifted down the hill, maybe an inch, just an inch, poised. And I opened my mouth to scream my brother's name. I had it in my chest, Wade. It was already coming up out of me, the way it comes up out of you when the person you have promised to watch is standing on a slope that is about to run, and it was going to come out into the dark at the top of my lungs. Wade, and the thing in the jacket beside me turned its covered face to me for the first time all night, turned and waited, leaned toward the sound I was about to make, ready to take it, because Hollis had told me, and I had not believed him enough. It will take the first name it hears you love, and I had my brother's name in my teeth. I did not say it. I do not know how. I have gone over it 1,000 times, and I cannot tell you where the strength came from, because it did not feel like strength. It felt like a hand over my own mouth. It felt like Boone's rule finally going all the way down into me in the 1 second it had to. Do not do your counting out loud in the dark. Do not say the number. Do not say the name. And I clamped my jaw on my brother's name so hard I cracked a molar. I did not know I cracked until the drive home. And instead of screaming Wade, I did the only other thing my body would do. I lunged out onto the running slope and grabbed the back of his pack in both mitts and hauled. The slope did not go all the way. That is the only reason I am telling this. It was a soft slab, and it had settled but not released, and it sat there groaning under us with the crack open above it, and I had Wade by the pack, and I was pulling him toward the far trees, not saying a word. Not his name, not anything, just pulling, and he understood. He got his snowshoes moving, and the two of us ran across the last of that poised slope, in a silence I put there on purpose, the loudest quiet of my life. And behind us I heard the thing in the jacket start across too, unhurried, even, and I heard it say into the space where my scream should have gone, in my brother's voice, "Easy," and I did not answer it, and we hit the far trees, and Hollis grabbed us both and pulled us in, and the slope behind us settled again and held. Boone came across last. He crossed the settled slab, slow and flat, with the crack still open above him, and he made the trees, and he did not say anything about what he had seen from the far side. He just put his mitt on my chest, once, hard, the way you put a hand on a man to tell him he did a thing right that he will not sleep over for the rest of his life, and then he turned us all downhill and we went. The drainage below the open path was in the trees, out of the worst of the wind, and it should have been the easy part, the part where you let your guard down because the danger is behind you, and that is exactly why it was the worst part, because the thing in the jacket had all of us together again in the timber with our lamps close and our nerves used up, and it went to work. It stopped doing Wade. I think it knew Wade had not worked, that I had swallowed the name, that the door it had tried was shut, so it opened another one. We were maybe a mile down, strung out in a line on the trail, with the litter left behind us, and the dead man behind that, and I was near the back, second to last, with the thing behind me, always behind me now, and it spoke to my back in a voice that was not Wade's, and was not any of the team's, and it took me a long, horrible second to place it, because I had not heard it out loud in 15 years, except in the half-sleep before waking, and it was Nathan. It was my dead brother's voice, the 20-year-old voice, the one that had said, that last morning, on the good clear slope, "You sure about this line?" And I had said, "It is fine. I dug the pit, it is fine," and it had not been fine. The thing behind me on the trail said, in Nathan's voice, in the exact pitch and drawl of a boy who had been under the snow for 15 years, "You sure about this line?" And then it waited. It waited for me to turn around. It waited for me to say his name, to say Nathan, to answer the question I had gotten wrong the first time, because that was the name I loved most and had never stopped loving, and it had dug all the way down to it while I was busy guarding Wade, and if I turned around and said Nathan into the dark, it would have a name, my favorite name, the one with the most grief packed into it, and it would answer to that name for the rest of my life. I did not turn around. I looked at the back of Wade's pack up the line, the living one, and I put one snowshoe in front of the other, and I did not turn around, and I did not say Nathan. And behind me, my dead brother's voice asked me again if I was sure about the line, patient, kind, the way Nathan had actually asked it, and I walked, and it asked again, and I walked, and somewhere in there I started to make a sound myself. Not words, just a low sound to fill my own head so I could not hear it, the way you hum in a dark house, And Petra dropped back beside me without a word and got her shoulder under my arm and walked me down that mile pressed against my side so I would have a warm living weight to hold on to that was not a name. And she never once asked what I was hearing, and I have loved her plainly and quietly ever since, and never told her why. We came down the drainage in the gray of the coming morning with the storm blowing itself out above us, and the closer we got to the trailhead, the less the thing behind me spoke, as if it were running out of the mountain the way a signal runs out at the edge of its range. And by the last mile it had gone quiet, and by the last half mile when the trees opened and I could see the yellow light of Command's trailer through the blowing snow, it did not speak at all, and I made the mistake of hoping. I hoped it had turned back at some line I had not seen, some boundary of the high country, that it went with the ridge and not with us, that we would come out onto the plowed lot and be six again and drive home. Hope is the last thing the mountain takes from you, and it takes it at the trailhead, in the light, where you think you are safe. Because when we came out of the timber into the lot, single file, snowshoes crunching on the packed snow of the pull-out, into the flat white glare of the trailer's work lights and the smell of the generator's exhaust and the blessed ordinary sound of a diesel idling, Boone stopped us at the edge of the plowed ground, and he did not count us. He wanted to. I saw him want to. Every man on that team wanted to turn around right then and count heads and be told a number, and Boone held up his mitt and shook his head. Not here, not yet. The doors, the cab. And we walked the last 30 yards to the trucks in a silence we were all holding together like a full glass, and we did not count, and we did not say a name. And we did the thing Boone had drilled into us for years without ever telling us why. We got into the light and into the cabs, and we shut the doors. Wade was already in my truck when I climbed in the passenger seat, where he had started the night, and I pulled the door shut against the wind, and the cab light came on, and there he was, my brother. Goggles up now, balaclava down, the scar through the eyebrow and the crooked tooth, and the left eye squinting more than the right in the sudden light, breathing hard, alive, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and neither of us could say anything for a while. Boone's voice came over the radio from the other truck, and it was the debrief voice, the flat done voice, and he did his count on the air the way you were supposed to, in the light, in the cabs, with the doors shut. Ground Team 2 to command, he said. Team is off the hill. And then he counted us truck by truck, and I keyed up when he got to mine, and I said 2 in the second truck. Wade and me and Boone tallied it out, and command copied it back, and the number that came out the other end was 6. 6 souls off the hill. 1 subject cached for daylight recovery. 6 of us. Not 7. 6. I have thought a great deal about that 6. About how badly all of us needed it and how fast we took it. Because a thing had carried the foot of our litter across the flat. A thing in our jacket had crossed the slide path behind Boone. A thing had walked a mile of timber at my back asking me in my dead brother's voice if I was sure about the line. And now we were in the cabs with the doors shut, and the count came to 6, and every one of us grabbed that 6 the way I had grabbed the words, Ground Team 1, all night long, because it is the number we wanted, and because the alternative was to sit in a warm truck at dawn and say out loud that we had come down a mountain 1 man heavier than we went up, and no one who has done this work will do that, not on the radio, not to command, not to each other. You get your number, and you keep it, and you go home. Boone signed us off the incident. Command said, good work, sorry for the outcome, drive safe, the road is drifting, and that was that. That was the whole of it, on paper. 6 up, 6 down, 1 deceased located. A clean report. A hard night. Nothing that would ever get written down anywhere but here. I do not do this work anymore. That is most of the aftermath there is. I sold the snowshoes to a kid off a classified ad and did not tell him where they had been. Boone died 2 winters later, in a bed of his heart, an old man, and I was glad it was a bed. Hollis I still call on the phone in the spring, and we do not talk about it, and the not talking about it is the whole conversation. Petra I married. She keeps the morgue job. She has never once asked me what I heard on that mountain, and I have never told her, and that is the deal we made without ever saying it out loud, which is the only kind of deal that holds. But before any of that, before the drive out, there was the lot, and there was the last count, the one nobody told me to do. I got down from the cab while the others were still stowing gear and stamping the cold out of their feet, because I could not sit still in the warm with the doors shut and the number at 6, and I walked back along the row of trucks to the edge of the plowed pullout where the timber started. The storm had blown through and left an inch of new snow over the packed ground, clean and unbroken in the gray coming light, and laid across it were our boot prints, all of them, coming out of the trees where the trail led out and crossing the open ground to the vehicles, and I counted them the way Boone taught me and the way I will do it until I die, out of the habit that is the only thing that mountain left me that I get to keep. I counted the sets coming out of the timber to the trucks, Boone and Hollis and Petra and Gil and the dog and Wade and me. 6 of us and the dog walking out, walking to the trucks, and every set ended at a door, which is how it is supposed to be. A print that comes out of the woods and stops at a truck is a man who got home. There was one more set. It came out from between the trucks from where we were parked, and it did not stop at a door. It crossed the plowed ground the other way, away from the vehicles, away from the light and the idling engines and the warm cabs, with everybody counted and safe inside them, out toward the black wall of the timber, where the plow had not gone and the snow lay deep and untouched, one boot in front of the other, unhurried, even a track that had learned to walk like the rest of us and had gotten it nearly right. And in the gray light I stood at the edge of the lot in 20 below and looked at the nearest of those prints, the one closest to me, the freshest, and it was filling slowly from the bottom with dark water, welling up and standing and not freezing. And the next one past it was doing the same, and the next, a line of them going away into the trees, each one filling with dark water, and I did not call out, and I did not follow them, and I did not count them out loud. The call came in on the district frequency a little after 4 in the afternoon, and I had the firefinder cranked around to the north before Lorna finished reading the coordinates, out of habit, the way a man reaches for a light switch in a house he has lived in his whole life. Overdue elk hunter. 9 miles of my country, give or take, last seen where Cold Fork drops off the backbone into the old timber. I wrote the name on the back of my hand with a pencil because I could not find the pad, and the pencil skated over the veins there like they were roots under thin dirt. Emmett Sarver. I said it back to her twice so she would know I had it. Then I stood in the middle of the lookout with the radio in my hand and the whole valley going gold and red under me through the glass, and I did what I always do before I let a search into my head. I looked at the country, and I let the country look back. Black Rock Lookout sits at 6,000 feet on a knob of black rock that gave it the name, and it is the last staff tower in the district, and probably the last one they will ever staff because they run cameras now. And cameras do not get old, and cameras do not talk to themselves, and cameras do not cost the government a pension. I have manned it going on 19 seasons. Before that, I ran a hotshot crew, and before that, I was just a kid from the mill town at the bottom of the grade who liked the woods more than he liked people. And none of that has changed, except that the kid is 68 now, and the knees went first, and then the left hip, and now there is a thing my heart does at night, a little stutter, a skip stare, that I have not told the district about and will not, because they would take the tower, and the tower is the only thing I have left that is entirely mine. I live alone up there 5 months a year, and most of the other 7 in a rented room at the bottom of the grade, and the truth is, the tower is the closest thing to a home I have had since the house went quiet, because the tower does not expect anything of me and does not remember anything about me and does not have an empty chair in it. My body has been putting me on notice for a while now. The knees I mentioned, the hip, the heart that skips its stare in the small hours and leaves me lying on the cot, counting in the dark, waiting for it to catch, the way I count the stairs, the way I count everything now, because counting is the thing a man does with his hands in his mouth when the rest of him has quit being reliable. The doctor at the clinic wants me to wear a monitor and come off the mountain. I told him I would think about it. I have thought about it. The answer is the tower, for as long as the tower will have me, and after that the answer is the woods, and I have made a kind of peace with that which I will not pretend is the same thing as not being afraid. What a fire lookout does is watch. That is the whole of it. 14 hours of glass and light, and a pair of good binoculars, and the Osborne fire finder in the middle of the floor, which is a brass ring on a map with a sighting bar across it. And when you see smoke, you line up the bar, and you read the bearing off the ring, and you call it in with a bearing and a distance and a township, and somebody on the other end writes it down. That is the job. It is a job for a man who can sit inside his own head for a long time without the walls closing in. Most people cannot. I never had trouble with it. I had trouble everywhere else. The tower is a cab, 14 feet on a side with glass on all four walls, and a catwalk around the outside, and a set of switchback stairs running down the tower legs to the ground, 30 of them, and I count them going up and going down. And lately, the count has started to cost me. There is a bed and a wood stove and a propane ring and a map table and the fire finder and a radio and a pair of glass insulators on the shutter hooks that keep lightning from coming in through the panes. Most nights, there is a lightning stool with glass legs I am supposed to stand on in a storm and never do. And there is the country, all of it, out the glass, in every direction. And after 19 years, I know it the way I know the inside of my own mouth, with my tongue. Every drainage, every saddle, every stand of old growth down in the folds where the fire never got, the big cedars and the dug fir 8 feet through the base, the ones we call the cathedral, down in the Cold Fork drainage, where a man could stand at noon in a green dark with his headlamp on and still not see the tops of the trees. That is where Emmett Sarver went in. I knew it before Lorna told me the rest. I knew it the way a man knows a phone is going to ring a half-second before it does. Here's the part I do not tell the district. It has to come out, because the rest of it does not stand up without it, and because I have carried the thing long enough that setting it down feels less like confession than like putting a heavy pack on the ground at the end of a long day. I had a boy. His name was Eli, in the fall of 1991. When Eli was 17, and I was a younger and stupider and stronger man than I am now. He went up Cold Fork after elk, alone. On the third day of a season, we had hunted together every year since he could carry a rifle. We had a fight the night before. I do not even remember what it was about now, which is its own kind of punishment, that a thing can cost you everything and not even leave you the dignity of remembering what it was. Something about a girl, something about the truck, something a father and a 17-year-old boy fight about on a cold porch with the wood smoke coming down flat off the roof because a storm is coming. He took the truck and drove up to the Cold Fork trailhead and left a note on the seat that said "Back by dark," and he walked in on Trail 217 with his grandfather's rifle, a 30-06 with a cracked stock we had wired and taped. And he did not come back by dark. The storm came in that night, the one we had smelled, 2 feet of wet snow above 5,000 feet in 11 hours. By the time we understood, he was really gone, and not just holed up somewhere waiting it out. The drainage was a white nothing, and the search was a nightmare of post-holing men, and a helicopter that could not fly, and dogs that could not scent through the melt. I ran that search myself. That was my mistake, the first of them. You do not run the search for your own boy. You cannot. Your judgment is gone before you tie your boots. But I knew that country better than any man alive, and I would not stand at the trailhead and let strangers do it. And so I ran it 9 days, and on the 9th day, the incident commander, a decent man named Pruitt, who is dead now, put his hand on my shoulder at the map board and said the thing they say, which is that we were transitioning from rescue to recovery, and I hit him, broke a tooth. He never wrote it up. We never found Eli. Not that fall, not the next spring when the snow went off, not ever. No rifle, no pack, no scrap of the red wool coat he wore that had been mine. 9 days I called his name into that drainage, until my voice was a ruin, and the drainage gave me back my own voice off the far wall, a half-second late, the way it does down there where the rock folds in, and that was the only answer I ever got. My own voice, late, coming back up out of the cathedral like the country was learning to say his name. His mother left the following year. I do not blame her. There was nothing left in the house but the two of us not finding him over and over at the kitchen table, and one of us had the sense to walk away from it. I stayed, and I did the only thing that let me sleep, which was to go find other people's. In the years after, I turned into the man the district calls when somebody does not come out of the timber, and I got good at it, better than a man has any right to want to be at a thing like that. A boy off the trail on Sawtooth, in a July thunderstorm, brought him out on my own back. A woman gone off a switchback on the backbone with a broken pelvis, 3 days, alive. An old rockhound, a down pilot, a pair of college kids who walked in for a waterfall in tennis shoes and walked their way into 3 feet of surprise snow. I closed them out, most of them, one way or the other, and closing a search is a real thing. It has a sound to it, the sound of a radio call that says subject located, and the whole machine letting its breath out at once. I have made that call more times than I can count. Every one of them was a stone I laid on the one search I never got to close, the one with no subject located at the end of it, the one that just stopped, and none of the stones ever covered it. And I kept laying them anyway, because a man does what lets him sleep. That is the whole of why I am the one they call for Cold Fork. Not because I know it, because I owe it. So, that is the wound, and it is out of the pack and on the ground now, and I will not pick at it again except to say this one thing, because it matters for what came after. Before Eli could walk in the woods alone, I taught him the whistle. Every kid I ever took out, I taught them the whistle, because a voice gives out and a voice does not carry, and a whistle does both. It is a plastic peelless whistle on a lanyard, orange, and the pattern is the oldest one there is, and no man alive invented it. 1 long blast means, "Where are you?" 2 blasts means, "I hear you, come to me." 3 blasts, 3 long ones means, "Help, right now, come." That is the whole language. There is no more to it than that, and there does not need to be. 1, "Where are you?" 2, "Come to me." 3, "Help." Eli had his on the lanyard around his neck when he walked up Cold Fork. It was the one thing the dogs might have found if he had blown it. He never blew it. 9 days, and I never heard it once, and I listened for it the way you listen for your own name in a crowded room, which is to say, I heard it 100 times a day, and it was never real. It was the wind in the snags, or a limb rubbing a limb, or the little lie the mind tells a man who wants a thing badly enough. I put my own whistle on the same kind of lanyard the spring after, and I have worn it every day. I have been in the woods for 34 years. It was around my neck when Lorna called about Emmett Sarver. I found myself holding it while she talked, running my thumb over the mouthpiece, the way another man might work a rosary, and I did not remember reaching for it. The details on Sarver were thin, the way they always are early. 51 years old. Came up alone from Auberry 2 towns over. His brother-in-law expected him back Sunday night for a birthday, and when he did not show and did not call by Monday noon, the family started dialing. And by Monday evening, the brother-in-law had driven up and found Sarver's truck still parked at the Cold Fork trailhead. Cold, locked, a coffee thermos on the hood gone to ice. He called the county. The county called the Forest Service, because it was our ground. And somewhere in the chain my name came up, because I am the one who knows Cold Fork, and because everybody in this district over the age of 40 knows that I am the one who knows Cold Fork, and knows exactly why, and mostly they have the grace not to say it. Lorna did not say it. Lorna is younger than my boy would be now, if he were, and she is the best dispatcher I have worked with, and all she said was, I know whose drainage this is, Wade. You do not have to be the one. I told her I would take the kid and go in at first light and set up a hasty search off the trailhead, and she said the kid, meaning Toby Dwyer. And I said yes, and she was quiet a second and said 10-4, be safe, and clicked off, and the tower was loud after. The way it gets, the ticking of the stove and the wind finding the west shutters, and the long empty hiss of the drainage 900 feet below me, going about its business in the last of the light, not caring, the way it never has. I did not sleep. I sat up at the map table with the propane lamp turned low, and I looked at Cold Fork on the quad sheet until the contour line swam, all those brown rings folding down into the blue thread of the creek, tighter and tighter, into the cathedral. And I found the little penciled X I put there 34 years ago and never rubbed out, the last place a dog hit anything. And I put my thumb over it the way I put my thumb over the whistle, and I told myself what a man tells himself, that it was a different man out there this time. That Sarver was 51 and probably had a bad ankle and a dead flashlight and was sitting under a deadfall waiting for daylight, cold and scared and alive, and that I would walk in there and find him and walk him out, and it would not fix a single thing that was broken in me, but it would be one man off that mountain instead of one more left on it. That was the deal I made with myself at the map table. One man off the mountain. When I walked in the next morning, I believed I was going to find Emmett Sarver. That is the truth of it. I believed it all the way down. I came down off the mountain in the dark to meet Toby Dwyer at the Cold Fork trailhead, and the first thing I will say about that morning is that it was a good one weather-wise, which is a thing you learn to be grateful for and to distrust in equal measure. 28 degrees at the trailhead, hard frost on the truck windows and on the seed heads in the ditch, and a sky going from black to gray to a thin, high blue with no cloud in it anywhere, which in late October in this country is a gift you do not get twice in a season. The larch had turned. They stood up out of the dark green of the fir all up the far wall of the drainage in long gold streaks, the way they do for about 10 days and then let go all at once. And I remember thinking Sarver picked a pretty week to get himself lost, and then I remember being ashamed of the thought, because a pretty week freezes a man just as dead as an ugly one. Toby was already there when I pulled in, stamping his feet by his green Forest Service rig with 2 thermoses and a look on his face that I knew because I had worn it. Toby Dwyer's 24 and built like a fence post, and he wants to do this work the way I wanted to do it at his age, which is to say he wants to be the one who carries somebody out, and the plain truth is there is no wanting. That survives. The first one a man carries out under a tarp instead of on his own feet, but he had not carried that one yet. He still had all his want. Sarver's truck sat where the brother-in-law had left it, nosed into the little pull-out under the trailhead sign, a tan Ford with an Auberry Gun Club sticker in the back glass and a fine gray fur of frost over all of it. The thermos was still on the hood, ice in it. I put my bare hand flat on the tailgate, and it was the temperature of the air and no warmer, which told me nothing except the thing I already knew, which was that Emmett Sarver had been off this mountain, or on it, for the better part of 3 days and 2 nights, and that the second night had gotten down into the low 20s, and that the math on a 51-year-old man in the low 20s for 2 nights was not the math I wanted to be doing at a frozen tailgate at first light. Here is where I made the decision that everyone will second guess, and that I will not defend, except to say that it was the right call for the country, whatever else it was. I sent Toby up to the tower. He did not like it. He wanted to walk in with me. But Cold Fork is a radio grave. The drainage folds in on itself, and the walls are 800 feet of rock and old timber, and there is no line of sight to any repeater from down in the bottom. And a search with no communications is not a search. It is 2 men getting lost separately. Somebody had to be high at a radio with a sightline to relay me to Lorna, and Lorna to the county, and to run the air support if the county sent a ship. The tower was the only high seat for 9 miles, and Toby could run a radio and read a map, and so I gave him my keys and told him to drive up, take the tower, keep the district frequency open and log everything, and blow nothing, meaning do not come down that road for any reason short of me calling for it, because 1 lost man was a search and 2 lost men was a disaster, and I was not going to be the disaster. He said, "You shouldn't go in alone, Wade. Regs say 2 on the ground." I told him the regs were written by a man who had never been in the Cold Fork, and that I had been going into that drainage alone since before he was a notion, and that I would check in on the hour, every hour, and that if I missed 2 check-ins in a row, he was to call the county and not 1 second before. He did not like that either, but he was 24 and I was the man who trained half the district, and he took the keys. I want to be honest about the other reason, the one I did not give him. I did not want a witness, not to what I might find down in the cathedral, and not to what I might do or fail to do when I found it. Some searches a man has to walk alone because the walking is the only thing he has left to offer, and there was a boy under 34 years of Duff and Needle Fall somewhere down that creek, or there was not, and either way I did not want Toby Dwyer's good clean wand standing next to me when I got to the bottom of it. So I shouldered my pack and I put a fresh battery in the headlamp. I would not need for hours, and I walked in on Trail 217 alone, with the frost crunching under my boots, and my breath going up ahead of me, and the whistle cold against my breastbone under 3 layers. And the sun came up over the backbone and put the light down into the top of the drainage in that flat gold way it does in the fall. And for the first mile it was just a walk in the woods on a beautiful morning, and my knees hurt, and my heart did its little stutter twice on the grade and settled, and I was a 68-year-old man doing the only work he was ever any good at. Trail 217 is the same trail Eli walked in on. There is only the one. A man cannot go to look for a lost hunter in the Cold Fork without going up the exact tread his own boy went up, past the same lightning-killed snag at the half-mile that has stood dead and silver longer than my boy has been gone, past the cut bank where the trail crosses the first seep and the mud takes a print. I have walked it 1,000 times since, and it never once got easier, and it did not get easier that morning. Every trip up that trail is a trip back into the worst 9 days of my life, and I do it, and I have never told the district that either, because a man who cannot separate the search in front of him from the search behind him has no business running the one in front, and mostly I can. And that morning, for 1.5 miles, in the frost and the gold light, with my breath going up ahead of me, I did. I found Sarver's sign 1.5 miles in, where the trail crosses the first bench, and a man with any sense stops to glass the far slope. He had stopped there. There was a flat rock with the frost scuffed off it where he had sat, and a torn corner of a granola bar wrapper caught under the edge of it, the silver kind, and a place in the frost-killed grass where a bipod had pressed 2 little holes. Good sign. Fresh enough. And then his boots went off the trail and down toward the creek, toward the cathedral, which is the wrong way, which is the way they always go, because a lost man goes downhill, and downhill in Cold Fork means down into the big timber where the light dies and the ground gets loud with water, and a scared man convinces himself the creek will lead him out. It does not lead him out. It leads him into the folds. The tracks were a hunter's tracks. Vibram, a size 10 or 11, heel-heavy, going downhill the way a tired man walks. I followed them off the trail and down into the first of the big trees, where the fir came up over me and the gold light closed off overhead and it went to that green underwater dark I have known my whole life. And the frost gave way to bare wet duff that took a print and held it, and I stopped at the top of the pitch where the ground drops toward the creek, and I did what you do. I took the whistle in my teeth, and I blew it once, one long blast, hard, and the sound of it went out flat into the timber and got swallowed the way sound does down there. One long blast. Where are you? And from down in the drainage, from somewhere below me and off to the left, in the direction the boot tracks ran, an answer came back. 2 blasts. 2 blasts. I hear you. Come to me. I stood there with the whistle still in my teeth and my breath gone tight and shallow, and I will say exactly what I thought, because it is the last wholly reasonable thing I thought that day. I thought, he knows the code. That was all. Relief, mostly. A lot of hunters know the whistle code. It is in every hunter safety course in the state. Sarver was a gun club man from a gun club family, and of course he knew it. And he had heard me, and he was down there, and he was alive enough to get a whistle to his lips and blow it twice, which meant he was alive enough to be carried out. And I took the whistle out of my mouth, and I cupped my hands, and I hollered his name down the pitch, Emmett, and my own voice went out and got eaten by the timber, and I did not think one thing about the answer that I should have thought. I did not think about the timing. The 2 blasts had come back too quick, too clean. A man who has been lost in cold for 2 nights, a man dry-mouthed and half out of his head, does not get a whistle to his lips and blow a crisp 2 count a half second after he hears you. He fumbles it. He blows one long wavering note and coughs and blows again. The answer I got came back on the beat. Both notes the same length, the same pitch, the same little bite at the end, like the second half of a thing that already knew the first half was coming. It came back the way an echo comes back, except an echo gives you your own note, and I had blown one, and the drainage had handed me back 2. I did not think about any of that. I put my head down, and I started down the pitch toward the water, toward the 2 blasts, toward Come to Me, and the big trees took me in. The cathedral does not let the day in. That is the first thing to understand about the place, and the last thing a man raised on open country ever gets used to. Up top, it was a blue morning with the larch on fire. 200 feet down the pitch, under the old fir, it was a green dusk that does not change from breakfast to supper, a light like the light at the bottom of a stock tank, and the ground went soft and dark and quiet with 300 years of needlefall, and the only bright thing in the whole world was the creek, running white and cold down the center of it over black rock, and the creek is the trouble. Because the creek never stops talking, and it talks loud enough to hide every other sound there is. I worked down toward the water on Sarver's tracks, and I blew the whistle again at the bottom of the pitch, one long, "Where are you?" and the 2 blasts came back, "Come to me," and they came back from downstream, which was where the tracks led, and I told myself that was good. That was the man moving toward the sound of me, or holding still and me closing on him. Either way, good. But the answer had not gotten any louder. I had come down 150 vertical feet toward it, and it was exactly as far away as before. The same distance, the same soft 2 notes off the water, and a man who has run as many searches as I have does not like a bearing that will not close. A sound gets louder when you walk into it. That is not an opinion. That is the physics of the thing. I put it down to the creek. The creek eats sound, I told myself. The creek is throwing the distance off, and I kept on down. I want to be plain about how this went, because the temptation looking back is to say I knew and I did not know, not for a long time, because knowing was not available to me. A man does not have a shelf in his head to set this on. When the evidence will not fit the shelf, he does not throw out the shelf. He shaves the evidence down until it fits, and he keeps walking, and that is not stupidity. That is how a mind stays a mind. So I shaved every wrong thing that afternoon. I shaved it down and made it fit, and I walked deeper into the cathedral on the strength of my own shaving, and the thing downstream let me. It wanted me to. I understand that now. It answered exactly well enough to keep me coming, and not 1 degree better, because a degree better and I might have stopped, and it did not want me to stop. I hit the creek at a wide gravel bar where the tracks did a thing I did not like. They came down to the water and they milled. A tired man makes a certain kind of track, and a milling man makes another, and these had gone from the first to the second right at the edge of the gravel, 6 or 8 steps turning in place, the way a man turns when he has heard a sound and cannot place it and is trying to face it, and then they crossed. Sarver had waded the creek there, in water that would have been shin-deep and cold enough to take his breath, and gone up the far bank into the timber on the north side. And I stood at the milling place and looked at the far bank, and blew the whistle one more time, one long, "Where are you?" and the two blasts came back from up the north slope, come to me, and this time, for just a second, they were not quite right. The second note was long. One long, two even blasts. That is the code. I hear you. Come to me. Two even. And the answer that came off the north slope was one even note and one long one, a short and then a stretch. And it is a small thing. It is nothing. It is the kind of thing a cold man does when his lips will not work. And that is exactly what I told myself. And I have gone over it 10,000 times since, and I know now what I half knew then, which is that it was not a cold man getting the code wrong. It was something getting the code almost right. It had the number of the notes. It did not quite have the shape. It was working from a copy, and the copy was good, and it was not perfect, and the place where it was not perfect was the place my whole life turned over. Standing on a gravel bar in water-loud dark with my dead son's whistle code coming back at me stretched in the second note. I crossed the creek. God help me, I crossed it. My boots filled and the cold went up my shins like a set of teeth, and I climbed the north bank into the timber after a bearing that would not close, and I told myself Sarver was hurt, that the wrong note was a hurt man. That hurt was why he had not come to me, and I had to go to him, and every word of that was a rope I was braiding for myself to climb down into the ground on. The radio saved me, that first time. The hour came up, and I keyed it, and Toby answered off the tower loud and clear, because I was still high enough on the north slope to catch a sliver of sky, and his good young voice in my ear was like a hand on the back of my neck pulling me up out of water. I told him where I was. Creek crossing below the gravel bar, working the north side on the subject's tracks, subject responding to whistle, and Toby said, responding how, and I said, whistle answers. And there was a pause, and Toby said, you want me to get the county rolling a team. And I looked up the black north slope, where the two blasts had come from, and I said, not yet. Let me close it first. And that was the second decision everyone will second guess, and they are right to, and I would make it again. Because I still believe there was a living man up that slope, and a living man up that slope does not need a helicopter. He needs the person already there to reach him before dark. Before dark. There is a phrase. I worked up the north bank on Sarver's tracks, and the tracks were where the next wrong thing was, though I did not let myself have it for a while. Down at the crossing, they had been a man's tracks, heel-heavy, tired, a size 10 or 11 pushing off wrong, the way a cold man pushes off. Up the bank they changed. The heel dug out of them first, so the prints went flat, whole foot, the way a man walks who is being careful, or the way a man walks who is not tired at all. Then the stride opened. I stopped, and I straddled two of the prints, heel to heel, and measured with my own boots, and it was better than 4 feet from one to the next. And a 51-year-old man on a wet uphill pitch does not stride 4 feet, he shortens up, he shuffles, the mountain takes the length out of his step. This step was getting longer going uphill. And then, above a little bench where the ground went soft and black and should have held a print like wet plaster, I found one that had no depth to it. The others around it pressed down a good inch into the duff, a man's weight on a man's foot. This one sat on top. The tread was there, the shape was there, the size was there, and the ground under it was not pushed down at all, like the print of something that had the shape of a man and not the weight of one. And I crouched over it with my ruined hands hanging between my knees, and I did not measure that one, because there was nothing to measure. And measuring is what a man does when he is trying not to feel, and for once the measuring had run out. I found the hat, maybe 40 minutes up the north slope. It was a blaze orange watch cap, wet through, hanging on the broken end of a fir branch about at the height of a man's head. And it stopped me cold because a man does not hang his cap on a branch at head height in the middle of a slope. He drops it, it comes off, and it falls, and it lies on the ground where it fell. This one was placed. The broken branch had gone up through the weave of it, careful. The way a man hangs a thing he wants found, or the way a thing gets hung to see if the shape of a man wearing it would bring another man up the slope. I took it off the branch. It was Sarver's. It had to be. Orange like a hunter wears, and it was wet clean through, and cold, and there was nothing wrong with it at all except where it was. And I stood there holding a stranger's wet cap in a green dark, and I called his name up the slope for the first time instead of the whistle. Emmett, I called. Emmett Sarver. The name went up the slope, and the timber took it and gave nothing back, and in the space after it, I got a lungful of the air off that ground, and the air had a smell in it that did not belong to any hunter. Wood smoke, which was right, a man makes a fire. Wet needle, which was right. And under the two of them, faint and sweet and heavy, the smell of an animal opened up and going. The smell off a gut pile a few days old. And there was no kill on that slope. No hunter had hung an elk in the cathedral. And I stood in that smell with the wet cap in my hand, and I called the name once more into it and got nothing. And then I quit calling, and I waited, and the waiting was the worst part, the waiting in the sweet air for the slope to decide what it was going to hand me. And the voice answered. I had been listening for a whistle so long that a voice was almost worse. It came down the slope from up above me, a man's voice, and it said a word, and the word was over here. Just that. Over here. And it was a good voice, a real man's voice. Tired and cracked the way a lost cold man's voice ought to be, and if it had come an hour earlier I would have run straight up the slope at it and wept. But I had crossed the creek behind a whistle that stretched its second note, and I had a dead man's cap in my hand hung at head height, and so instead of running I held still and I did the thing a searcher is trained never to do, which is nothing. And I listened, and the voice came again, over here, and the second time it came, it was the same. Exactly the same. Over here, on the same two notes, with the same little break on the second word, in the same place. Not the way a man says a thing twice. The way a thing plays a sound twice. Emmett, I called. Are you hurt? Can you walk? And I waited, and there was a space, and up the slope in the dark the voice said, over here. That was when I stopped calling him Emmett in my head. I did not have a name for what was up the slope, and I still do not, and I will not reach for one now the way people always seem to need to, because the ones that reach for a name are reaching for a shelf, and the whole horror of it is that it does not go on a shelf. But I stopped calling it Emmett, and I stopped going up. I sat down on a deadfall with the wet cap in my lap, and I made myself think. The light was already going, not because it was late, it was maybe 2 p.m, but because the cathedral takes the light early from the bottom up, and I had a headlamp and food, and I was not lost. I knew exactly where I was. I could have walked out to the trailhead in 90 minutes if I turned around right then, and I want that on the record. At 2 p.m. on the north slope of Cold Fork, I could have walked out, and I knew the way, and my legs still worked. The door was open. I sat on the deadfall, and I felt the door open behind me, and I did not take it, because up the slope a voice that was almost a man's was saying over here into the dark, over and over, on the same 2 notes, and I could not make myself leave a voice. Even that voice, even knowing what I was starting to know, because leaving a voice in that drainage was the thing I had done once already, and it had cost me everything I had, and I would sooner have died than do it twice. And the thing up the slope knew that. It had to know that. It had my cap on a branch and my son's whistle coat in its mouth, and now it had found the one rope I would always climb down, which was a voice calling for help in the Cold Fork. And it played that rope like it had been made to. I keyed the radio off hour, which I never do, and I could not raise Toby. I had come down enough on the north bench that the sky was gone. I got a hiss, and then a fragment of his voice, chopped, aid, say, and then nothing. And I told myself he had heard enough to know I was fine, and I put the radio away. And up the slope the voice said, over here. And I can put my finger on the exact moment the afternoon turned all the way over. Because it had a moment, it was not gradual. I called up the slope one more time. Not the subject's name. I was done with the subject's name. I called the thing I should not have called, the thing that came up out of me from 34 years down, because I was tired and scared, and sitting on a deadfall in the one place on earth I had lost the only person I ever made, and I called up that black slope. I said, Eli. And the voice came back down, and it did not say over here. It said, Dad, here is the thing that saved my life, and it is such a small thing that I have never been able to make anybody understand it. The 2 or 3 people I have ever tried to tell, Eli never called me Dad. Not once in 17 years. He called me Pop. It started when he was 3, because his mother's father was Dad in that house, and there could only be one, and it stuck, the way a thing sticks with a kid, and for 17 years I was Pop. Pop, can I? Pop, look. Pop, I'm sorry. And the last full sentence he ever said to me on that cold porch was, Pop, you don't listen. And he was right, and that is the word I have carried. Pop, in his voice, for 34 years. The voice on the slope said, Dad. It had everything else. It had the pitch of a 17-year-old, and it had the little rasp Eli got from a bout of croup that never fully left him, and it had the rising break at the end that meant he was scared and did not want me to know it. It had all of that. It was so close that my body answered it before my mind could. I was on my feet with my arms already coming up, 34 years old again, and reaching. And it said, Dad, and the word was wrong, and the wrongness went through me like cold water, because whatever was up that slope had gotten into me deep enough to find Eli and pull him up and put him in the air, but it had pulled him up out of the wrong well. It did not have him. It had a copy of him, a close copy, built out of everything a scared father broadcasts standing in a place where he lost his boy, and the copy said Dad because the thing did not know the word was Pop, because that word was not on the outside of me where it could reach it. That word was all the way down at the bottom, under everything, and it was mine, and it was the one thing in me the thing could not fake, and it faked everything else, and it missed the one that mattered. And that miss was a hand that reached up out of 34 years and took me by the collar and hauled me back from the edge of that slope. I said, out loud, in a voice I did not recognize, You're not him. And the slope was quiet. And then, from up above me in the dark timber, the voice said, Dad again, exactly the same, on the same notes, with the same break. And then it said it again, Dad, Dad. And it was not pleading now, it was calling. It was casting the word down the slope, the way I cast a whistle down a pitch, once every few seconds. Patient, sweeping, and I understood standing at the bottom of that slope with a dead man's wet cap in my hand that I was not listening to a lost boy calling for his father. I was listening to something use a lost boy's voice to search. It was gritting the slope. It was calling a name at intervals and listening for the answer. And the name it was calling was a lure, and the answer it was listening for was me. And somewhere in the last hour, without a line on a map to mark it, the search had turned inside out. I had walked in to find the lost man, and down here in the green dark with the creek eating every true sound, the lost man had started to look for me. I turned around to walk out. I want to be clear that I still could have, even then, I had my bearings. I had the creek on my right hand, which meant the trailhead was upstream, and up, I had a headlamp and most of a day's light left somewhere above the canopy. And I turned my back on the slope and the dad, dad, dad falling down it, and I started back toward the creek crossing at a good pace, not running. A man does not run in that ground in the dark, but moving out, and I got maybe 200 yards along the bench toward the crossing when I saw the light. It was across the creek, on the south side, the side I had come down. It was a headlamp, a white headlamp, the same cold blue white as the one strapped to my own forehead, and it was moving through the timber over there at about my height off the ground, at about my speed, going the same direction I was going, upstream, toward the crossing, toward the trailhead, toward out. My first thought was a good thought, a searcher's thought, and it was Toby, and it was wrong, and I knew it was wrong before I finished thinking it, because Toby was at the tower 900 feet up and 4 map miles away with my keys, and because I had told him to blow nothing and come down that road for nothing, and because a man does not cross the cold fork and work down the far bank without calling out, and this light was not calling out. It was pacing me. I stopped to watch it, and it stopped. I want to be exact about this because it is the kind of thing the mind wants to soften afterward, and I will not let it. I stopped walking, and I counted, and at a count I would put at 3, the light across the creek stopped too. Not right away. Late. A half-second late. The way the second whistle note ran long. The way my own voice used to come back off the far wall a half-second behind me, and I stood on the north bench in the dark with my light off now. I had killed my light, and across the black slot of the creek the other light hung there in the trees, waiting at the height of a man's head, and it did not go out. And here is the part I kept measuring against everything I know, because it was the plainest wrong thing of the whole day, and I have never gotten past it. A headlamp on a walking man bobs. It has to. A man walks, and his head rides his neck, and his shoulders ride his hips, and every footfall puts a little dip and sway into the beam, up and down, side to side, the whole night long. And after 40 years of watching lights move on, slopes in the dark, I can read a man's gait off his headlamp, the way I can read his face. Tired, hurt, scared, drunk, it is all in the way the light rides. This light did not ride, it went level. When it moved, it slid along at the one height, smooth, no dip, no sway, no footfall in it anywhere, the way a lamp moves when you carry it in your hand and hold your hand still, except there was no arm carrying it. There was nothing under it that I could see, and nothing beside it. Just the cold blue-white circle gliding through the black timber at the height of a man's head with no man's walk in it at all. And I watched it slide, and I thought, that is not carried. And I could not make the thought go anywhere I wanted it to go. I have run night searches for the better part of 40 years. I have put a dozen headlamps on a dozen slopes and worked a grid in the dark, sweeping a drainage line abreast, each light holding its interval, calling and listening, walking the lost man's country until the country gives him up. And standing there with my light dead in my back against a fir 8 feet through the base, watching that lamp pace me up the far side of the creek, holding its interval, matching my line, I understood what I was looking at, and it was the worst thing I have ever understood. Worse than Pruitt's hand on my shoulder, worse than the empty spring when the snow went off and there was nothing under it. I was looking at a search, a proper one, run right, lights abreast, holding the interval, sweeping the drainage. And I was not on the search. I was what the search was looking for. The radio came alive against my hip, and I nearly went down. It was Toby, chopped and hissing, but there, the hour must have come up, and I got the radio to my mouth with a hand that would not work right. My fingers had gone to wood. That fine motor thing that happens to a scared man. I could not find the key with my thumb, and when I found it, I said his name too loud. Toby, Toby, and he came back through the hash. Aid, there, you, been trying. And I said, listen to me. I need the county, I need a team, and I need them now. And I could not tell if he heard, and his voice broke up and came back, and what came back turned my legs to water where I stood. He said, heard you whistling. Up here. By the tower. Couple times now. You okay? Thought you came back up. I had not blown my whistle in over an hour. I had not been within 4 miles or 900 vertical feet of that tower since before first light. And Toby Dwyer, sitting in my lookout with my keys and my radio and my whole life around him in that little glass room, had been hearing my whistle. Up there, close. The come to me, I would have bet the last of my heart on it. 2 blasts, patient, at intervals, sweeping the knob. And the good young man had heard it and thought it was me come back and had maybe already started down the stairs to open the door. Toby, I said, into the radio, into the hiss, and I heard how my voice came out. It came out the way a whistle note runs long when the thing blowing it has the number right and not the shape. It came out almost like my own voice, and not quite, and I hated it, Toby. Listen, do not open the door. Whatever you hear, do not go out on the catwalk. Do not come down those stairs. That is not me. And the radio gave me back a wall of hash, and under the hash, far down under it, so faint, I have spent 3 years telling myself I made it up, and have never once believed it. 2 even notes. A whistle. 2 blasts. Come to me. Coming from his end of the radio. Coming from the tower. And then the radio died for good, and the creek was the only thing left talking, white and cold and endless over the black rock, and across the slot the other light started moving again, upstream, toward the crossing, toward the one place I could get back over the water, and it was not pacing me anymore. It was ahead of me now. It was getting to the crossing first. I did not go to the crossing. I could not. The light was already at it, hanging there over the black water where the gravel bar was, patient, and I stood on the north bench and understood that the water was shut to me, that the way out I had come in by was closed and standing open at the same time, open like a door held open by a hand, and I turned my back on it, and I went up. Up was the only thing left. Up the north slope, away from the creek, away from the light, climbing on all fours where the pitch steepened, grabbing roots and the wet boles of trees, my boots still full of creek water and gone numb. And I climbed with my own lamp off, because as long as my lamp was off, it could not fix me exactly. It had to hunt me, and I wanted it to have to hunt me. My knees screamed on the pitch. My heart did the thing, the skip stare, twice, 3 times, a fist opening and closing wrong in my chest, and I put my forehead against the cold bark and waited for it to catch, and it caught, and I climbed on. The light crossed the creek behind me. I did not see it cross. I felt the dark change. And then it was on my side of the water, and coming up, holding its interval below me and to my right, always to my right, and every time I tried to angle left toward the head of the drainage, toward the long way around to the trailhead, the light slid left too and rose on that side, and I was looking straight at it through the trees, cold and blue-white at the height of a man's head. And I turned away from it, because a man turns away from a light in his eyes, and turning away put me climbing right and up and up and right, and I understood it was steering me. It let me have every direction but one. It closed the ones it did not want, the way you close gates on stock, without hurry, just standing in the gap until the animal turns. And the gap it left open for me went up the north slope toward the ridge and the saddle and the high country, toward home. Then it started to talk me in. A searcher talks a subject in. When you get close, when you have a voice or a light on the lost man and you are closing the last of it in bad ground, you talk to him the whole way. You keep him with you. You say the things. Keep talking to me. Sing out. Come to my voice. You're doing good. Stay with me. Keep 'em coming. And I have said those words on 100 slopes to 100 cold and failing people, and they are good words. They are a rope you throw with your mouth. And out of the dark below me and to my right, in a voice that was almost mine now, almost, it began to throw me the rope. Keep talking to me, it said. I did not talk. Sing out, it said. Come to my voice. I climbed. My hands would not close right. A root I grabbed slid through my fingers because my fingers had quit taking orders, and I went down onto my face in the duff, and the smell came up, and the smell was the second thing that was almost right and not, because it was wood smoke and wet needle, and under it something sweet and organ heavy, the smell of a gut pile, the smell of an elk carcass 3 days opened, and it was coming off the ground I was lying on. Warm. The duff was warm under my chest, where no sun had touched it in 300 years, warmed by something that had lain there. And I got up off that warm, sweet ground faster than my legs had any business moving. And I climbed, and below me the almost voice said, You're doing good in my own cadence. with the same little thing I do on the word good, and it was close now. It had climbed while I fell. I did the thing you are trained to do, and must never need. I stopped, and I put the whistle in my teeth, the whistle that had been around my neck for 34 years, and I blew it 3 times. 3 long blasts. Help, right now. Come. Into the graying dark, up the ridge, where somewhere there had to be a world that would answer a whistle the way a world is supposed to. 3 long blasts, as hard as I have ever blown anything. My last true call. And it came back perfect. 3 long blasts, down the slope, close, even, right, the shape right, the length right. Help, right now, come, thrown back at me, off the thing that was driving me, and I stood there with the whistle dead in my teeth, and I knew that the one signal I had left, the one that was supposed to reach past all of this and pull the whole machine of rescue up that mountain toward me, had been taken too, had been in its mouth all along, was maybe the sound Toby had heard up at the tower and gone to the door for. There was no signal left that was only mine. It had them all. Where are you? Come to me. Help. It had learned the whole language, every word, and there was not one word left I could say into that drainage that would not come back to me in my own almost voice, patient, close, wearing me toward the high country, like water wears a bank. So I quit calling, I quit answering. I put the whistle in my shirt, and I climbed with my mouth shut and my light off, and that is the only thing that is mine in this whole account that I am not ashamed of. That in the end, I understood the one move it could not counter was silence. The thing it could not copy was a man who would not make a sound. And I went up the last of that slope in the dark like a deer that has quit blowing and just runs. And behind me and below me the almost voice went on, throwing the rope into the empty places where I was not answering. Keep talking to me. Come to my voice. Stay with me. You're doing good. And it came up the mountain behind me, because the silence was the only thread of me it had left to follow. And I gave it that thread, and nothing else. All the way up, all the long climb, my heart stuttering and catching and stuttering, my legs gone, my hands ruined. An old man going up out of the ground on the last of what he had, and the dark went from black to the color of iron, and then to the color of ash, and I came up out of the top of the timber onto the open shoulder of the ridge, into the first gray of the morning, and there, black against the graying east, up on its knob of black rock where I had come down from it a lifetime ago, in the dark, stood the tower. Home. My tower. Glass on 4 sides and a bed and a radio and a locked door at the top of 30 stairs, and I broke for it. I ran the open ridge for it, in the wet, gray light with everything I had left. An old man running flat out for the one lighted room in his life, and the timber behind me went quiet. The almost voice quit. The light was gone, and for 100 yards of open ground I let myself believe I had run it off, that it would not leave the trees, that I had made it, and I got to the foot of the tower with my chest tearing and my legs giving, and I put my hand on the cold steel of the stair rail, and I looked up the switchback stairs at my own dark cab against the dawn, and I opened my mouth to call up to Toby, and I did not, because the cab was dark, and it should not have been. Toby had my keys and my radio, and it was near first light, and there was no lamp lit up there, no movement, no good young face at the glass, nothing. The whole tower, black and still against the sky, going pale behind it, and I stood at the bottom of the stairs with my hand on the cold rail and my breath sawing, and I did not call up. I did not blow the whistle. I did not put one boot on the first stair, because I had learned the one lesson that drainage had to teach, and I had paid for it with everything. And the lesson was that when the thing you are looking for starts helping you look, the looking is over, and you are the one who is lost. And I was not going to go up 30 stairs into a dark tower calling a name and have the tower answer me. So I stood at the bottom in the first light, and I held still, and I made no sound, and I waited to see what the tower would do. The light came up the way it does, gray to pearl, to a thin, cold gold, laid flat along the ridge, and it found the tower first, the way it always finds the high thing first. And the glass of the cab caught it, and threw it back dull and blind, and I could not see in 30 stairs. I counted them out of habit, standing at the bottom the way I have counted them 10,000 times, and my mouth was full of the taste of a old penny, and my hand on the rail would not stop shaking, and the shaking was not the cold. Somewhere off down the drainage a single bird started up, then stopped, as if it had thought better of it. The creek was too far below now to hear. There was nothing to hear at all. I did not call Toby's name. I did not blow the whistle. I stood at the foot of my own stairs in the first light with my head tipped back, and I looked up at that dark cab against the paling sky, and I waited, the way you wait for a thing you already know, and I made no sound. Because sound was the rope, and I would not throw it, not up those stairs, not into that dark, not ever again. And from up inside the tower, from up inside my own dark cab at the top of my own 30 stairs, in the still gold quiet of first light, the whistle answered. 2 blasts. Even. The shape right, the length right, the little bite on the end exactly right, better than right, perfect, the way only a copy is perfect. 2 blasts, patient, come down out of the glass room where I have watched this country for 19 years. The pattern I taught my boy on a porch when he was small enough to hold the whistle in 2 hands. The pattern I have worn against my breastbone every day since the snow took him. Thrown down the stairs to me soft and sure and welcoming. I hear you. Come to me. I did not climb